Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm, and you are watching fourth part of What If Naruto Was the Heir of an Unknown Goddess. If you enjoy this video, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Now, wasting no more time, let's start the story.
For as long as he could recall, Naruto struggled with concentration. He had trouble staying still, got bored easily, and his thoughts were constantly racing. This was never more clear than when he had first enrolled in the academy and realized how easily he would become stir-crazy when made to sit and listen to his teacher's babble. He has a history of high levels of inattention, is easily distracted, impulsive and restless, hyperactive, or hypersensitive, according to his records. His classmates would attest to the fact that he was slow, simple-minded, and even incapable of understanding concepts that had been fully explained. He also failed to notice even the most basic of details. While the majority thought that he gained nothing from harboring the nine-tailed beast that had been bestowed upon him at an early age, and the consequences had been staring everyone in the face, none had simply realized what it was. When Washu reviewed her research after Naruto had recovered from the extraction, she found a startling truth. Rather than his mind being too slow, it was actually too fast. Though most would take several minutes to finish one, he had already burned through 50. He was unique in that he observed everything in startling detail and saw too much, not too little. His reflexes were so developed that, when he exerted effort, his reactions seemed to happen almost instantly, and he was acutely aware of his surroundings at all times. As part of the package, other Jinchuriki were granted some elemental control, but Naruto possessed senses that were beyond comprehension. This, in turn, would clarify how he managed to learn 2 additional things in less than 2 hours and master a technique as complicated as the Kage Bunshin in less time than most Chunin would take to master the A-ranked technique. The issue was that he had never had guidance on how to make use of his gift, which meant it was wasted and sometimes misinterpreted. But many would not see the gift Naruto had been given until explosions rang out from all around the arena and Nin jumped from the bleachers and charged him. For Naruto, the bottle's adrenaline seemed to have made him hyper-aware of everything around him, and it felt as though time had stopped altogether. He could see that not a single one of the Hidden Leaf shinobi had been taken by surprise by the attack, and that they had all responded instantly and without the slightest hesitation, with the exception of a few genin in the stands mixed in with the civilians. He could see shinobi and dignitaries from other villages trying their best not to get entangled in the chaos behind him, and he could see Genma already fending off several shinobi that had leapt from the stands at him. He could see that there were only Auto shinobi pursuing him. In fact, he didn't see any Sunanin attacking anyone. He turned to face his own enemies, who were still pursuing him. He saw the 10 shinobi jump out at him, and as he dug his feet in, the blonde genin reached down and pulled his yulax in preparation for the fight. As soon as the first Auto nin arrived, Naruto sprang forward, dodging the first downward swipe of a kunai. The young teen then swiftly ducked into his opponent's personal space until the yulax blade flashed. Naruto then moved on to his next opponent, blocking a Tonto's blade and striking back with a swift swipe to the man's jugular organ. He immediately kicked the man back, causing the body to fall onto another charging nin. This gave him the opportunity to shift his focus, parrying a falling blade and using the momentum of his opponent to slip past him and bury the left blade's edge in the back of his neck before ripping it free. Leaping swiftly to his left, he let the kunai that was aimed at his back to float by and lodge itself in the chest of another nin. Meanwhile, he launched himself backward, piercing the startled Auto nin's abdomen with his right blade. He viciously tore the blade free out of the man's side as he spun to his right. He then ducked behind the man, allowing 3 shuriken to land in his torso and complete the kill. 5 down, the teenager let go of his human shield and struck back, launching a kunai that struck the Auto nin in front of him squarely in the throat. The blonde quickly met a similar fate as he rolled forward, evading their blows, only to slit their legs as he went by. Swiftly rising to his feet, he lunged back, piercing the back of each person's neck. He wrenched his blades free, held them high, and, using some chakra, slammed his foot into his assailant's knee, stopping a descended Tonto before it could reach his head. With his opponent's knee giving way and his arm quivering, Naruto threw his left fist forward, the yulax blade piercing through the neck and leaving it partially extended. The blonde then spun around, nailing the charging nin in the back and straight into Genma's senbon, which became lodged in his throat. Naruto was standing in the middle of a circle of bodies when time appeared to be returning to normal, and Genma was staring at him in shock. Meanwhile, there was a heated standoff going on atop the booth where the cages had been before. The Sandaime Hokage, covered from head to toe in the armor he had worn during the Great Shinobi Wars, stood before the Kage, Raikage, Mizukage, and Tsuchikage in a large translucent purple barrier. Orochimaru, an S-class nuke. Nin, and the current Auto Nin leader, was standing opposite him. This was the scene that Tatsuki Miyako saw when she appeared next to the different Kage and their bodyguards. The woman approached the barrier, making sure to leave plenty of space between her and it to avoid touching it, and mused, "Shishi engine, 4 violet flames formation. Huh, interesting. You recognize it?" The Raikage asked. "I made it, but I never used it because I thought it was a failure," the woman said. Her right hand flexed through 3 half-seals as she spoke, and then her index finger started to glow with chakra. She drew a circle in the air in front of her, revealing a luminous blue circle, and then used her right hand to punch forward. The circle shot forward into the center of the barrier in an instant, holding there for a brief moment before a sizable circle was cut through it. Miyako landed just as the hole closed back up, effortlessly hopping through the freshly punched opening. Observing the woman's appearance, Orochimaru asked, "Interesting, who are you?" Miyako approached the Hokage and kicked him in the shin, saying, "Someone who was enjoying the show until you started this foolishness." The old man demanded, "Ow, what was that for?" "Letting that little worm get away with one of my barrier techniques," said Miyako. Orochimaru said in an enigmatic tone, "So you're the one who created those techniques, the mysterious Genkei." The Tsuchikage cried out, "What Genkei?" His eyes going wide with disbelief. The Kage asked, "What's wrong, Tsuchikage?" Onoki asked, "That woman, how the hell is she still alive?" "Who is she?" The Mizukage asked. "She's a legend from the time of the clan wars. When most would hire the Senju or the Uchiha, others still mostly the daimyo would hire her. They say when it came down to taijutsu she was the superior to Uchiha Madara as well as Senju Hashirama and Tobirama. However, while those 3 focused on offensive techniques, her specialty was in defensive, specifically barrier techniques. She's the reason no daimyo's home has ever been successfully breached as she designed the barriers surrounding all of them." According to Onoki, Kachiyose, Edo Tensai, summoning, impure world reincarnation. Following the call, the 4 cages turned back in time to witness 3 caskets emerge from the barrier's interior. The Hokage had attempted to stop the summoning inside the barrier, but Miyako held his arm back before he could. Glancing back at her, he noticed a slight nod from her and chose to observe instead of responding. The man with gray skin and numerous cracks was visible when the lid of the first coffin on the right was removed. But even Hiruzen was appalled when he realized the body belonged to Senju Hashirama, the Shodai Hokage. A similar form was concealed within the second casket, but it belonged to Senju Tobirama, the younger brother of the Naidame Hokage. When the third lid finally slid away, the Hokage recognized Zaku the Sound Genin from the Chunin exam preliminary as the form that had been revealed, not some formidable historical figure. Then, almost instantly, the body burned into a pile of ashes and was engulfed in deep purple flames right before their eyes. Orochimaru became fixated on Miyako after she said, "Well, it seems someone didn't know what they were doing." The woman said, literally releasing a torrent of murderous intent as she lashed out at the Sannin. "I take it you tried to summon the Yondaime Hokage, hoping to complete the set. However, he sacrificed his soul to the Shinigami in order to stop the Kyuubi. All you've done by trying to do so is catch the Death God's attention for intruding on his territory. Still, you should consider yourself lucky. I'd have ripped your soul out myself for daring to summon my son before me in such a state." Orochimaru said, ignoring his third choice error and thinking it was excessive, "Humph, no matter, I still have these 2. Maybe, if you can even initiate the technique," Miyako remarked, a patronizing smirk sweeping across her features. Orochimaru pulled out 2 paper tags that looked a lot like explosive notes and threw them at the 2 corpses who were watching as they struck flesh and sank into the bodies after noticing the smirk on her face and the mocking tone in her voice. The 2 brothers emerged from the coffins, which had sunk into the earth, and slowly the 2 bodies started to regain their color until they were lifelike. The eyes then snapped open. The man with black hair, referred to as the Shodai Hokage, said, "Well, this is interesting." The Naidame Hokage, a white-haired man, said, "Edo Tensai, our souls have been summoned and planted into prepared bodies." Though his tone was more one of exasperation than anger, the Shodai said, "I told you not to finish that technique." Miyako pointed out to both men, "You should have known better, Hashirama. That brother of yours always thought he knew best." After a few moments of staring, Hashirama burst out, "Miyako-chan." With surprise. "How long has it been?" Tobirama inquired. "You see the blonde kid down there in the arena?" When she asked a question, everyone turned to face the arena and watched as Naruto swiftly and methodically slaughtered a group of Auto Ninja, showing no discernible thought or emotion beyond basic responses. All of them were impressed, if only because of his age, as he threw the last of them to Genma, where he was senbon to the throat and died. Everyone in the room, with the exception of Hiruzen, gasped in disbelief as Miyako said, "His name is Naruto, he's our grandson." After a short while, Hashirama said, "He has mother's hair." "Yes," Tobirama said, narrowing his gaze to his grandson, who they saw leave the arena after Genma said a few words. Asking Miyako again, Tobirama asked, "How much longer do you plan to keep that illusion up?" Miyako scowled before her form shimmered and she revealed herself in her youthful form. Hashirama remarked, "You haven't aged a day." With surprise. Tobirama turned to face the Hokage and remarked, "Yet Hiruzen has aged considerably." "Well, considering it's been 39 years since you handed me the hat and all the trouble that comes with it, I'd say I've aged gracefully, sensei." Hiruzen replied. "Now that you've all had a chance to catch up, what say we get started?" Upon uttering these words, Orochimaru pulled out two kunai that had tags wrapped around their handles and hurled them towards the heads of each revived Hokage. To his surprise, though, as the blades got closer to the two Senju clan legends, they leaned aside, allowing the kunai to pass through them unharmed and into the barrier, where they soon turned to ash. "What?" was Orochimaru's shocked exclamation. As he and Hashirama turned to face the Sannin, Tobirama said, "I created this technique, Gaki. I stripped control away from you a while ago. We just wanted to learn as much as we could about what's going on." When the snake Sannin saw this, he was about to order the barrier to be removed when two other figures leapt onto the roof. Jiraiya's was one of them, but Tsunade's was the other, a figure he did not anticipate, and her expression was one of pure rage. Naruto was the only person in the village who could confidently claim to know how to navigate every street. His upbringing had given him a number of abilities that had been essential to his survival at no other time than right now. He mostly avoided rooftops where he would be easily seen and stayed in back alleys and higher altitudes. Rather, he continued to operate largely as he had during his time in the academy, lacking the necessary physical skills to navigate the ninja highway while still maintaining his need to remain unseen. Although he could have used the tunnels beneath the village, he decided against it because he would have to write an after-action report and the tunnels would remain hidden in the extremely unlikely event that he had to leave the village. Occasionally, he would return to the ground and remove any single auto nin he happened to come across before making his way back up to the balcony levels in order to remain undetected. When he eventually arrived at the actual village's edge, he leapt from a rooftop ledge, caught himself on the ledge of the village wall, and hauled himself up. He ignored the sounds of fighting, concentrating on the trail in front of him that led to a wide trench that vanished into the woods. He saw three auto nin sitting on the ground, framing a large open scroll, and flying through seals at the edge of the forest. The blonde narrowed his eyes at the sight and flipped through his own short chain of seals before breathing out deeply. Futon. Daitopa, wind release, great breakthrough. The impact was felt instantly as a strong wind appeared, slamming into the three auto nin, picking them up, and throwing them through multiple trees. The force of the impact left several deep wounds on the victims' bodies and reduced the scroll to shreds. Naruto leapt off the wall, landing softly on his feet before sprinting into the forest and using the trees as a means of propulsion. It did not take him long to locate his target, as a flurry of sand-made projectiles was hurled in his direction, forcing him to swiftly fall off the branch he had landed on. He quickly identified Gaara by following their flight pattern. Gaara was the red-headed figure standing in a completely destroyed clearing with two enormous sand-made arm constructs covering his arms that ended in claws. His face was also covered in the substance. His eyes had changed, taking on a black background and an amber hue with four pointed pupils in place of his previous ears, which were replaced by a pair that rested atop his head. Sand also coated his torso, and his gourd had been replaced by a long, flowing tail. Admiring the sight, Naruto mused, "Man, he's like a mini Biju." The fox surprised the blonde by saying, "That last attack of yours must have really pissed him off, Gaki. Transformations generally happen in stages and he seems to have bypassed them." The blonde wasn't expecting it. Naruto leapt straight towards the Suna nin, ignoring the fox as he did so. However, his first kick was blocked by the raised forearm of one of his artificial arms. He barely escaped Gaara's clawed swipe with his right arm, flipping back and off the arm before darting forward and spiking a fist in the direction of the redhead's face. The blonde was painfully knocked away by Gaara's tail, which smashed him from his left side and sent him flying, even though the blow never connected. With lightning speed, he recovered to land on all fours, skidding to a stop and looking up in time to see that Gaara's arm had pinned him and he had been smashed into a tree. To the redhead's astonishment, though, he had only been in the lead for a moment when the blonde was engulfed in a plume of smoke that parted to reveal a shattered log. Suddenly, Gaara felt a tug on his left arm. Turning around, he saw that a golden chain had emerged from the nearby forest and was wrapped around his arm. Before he could act further, he experienced multiple similar pulls and discovered that all three of his other limbs, including his tail, were similarly bound. Meanwhile, inside the tree canopy, Naruto sighed as he studied the bound redhead. He was now employing a method known as Kongo Fusa, or adamantine sealing chains, which was only used by the Uzumaki clan. A scroll detailing Uzumaki techniques had been discovered by him among the belongings his mother had left for him, but this was the only one he truly knew because he recalled her using it to bind the fox. Sadly, he wasn't very skilled at the technique yet, so he could only produce one chain rather than four. For this reason, he had made 4 shadow clones and had them use the technique while he held back in order to trap Gaara. Nevertheless, realizing that his plan was working, he took out a tag Jiraiya had given him from his pouch, explaining that it was a chakra. Suppressing seal that, when applied to his forehead, would enable him to handle Gaara. Naruto could only watch in dismay as a massive pillar of sand erupted upward, engulfing him, but before he could move in, Gaara tensed up and let out a loud yell. Back within the village proper, the group of genin, with the obvious exceptions of Sasuke and Naruto, had been assigned to help guard over the evacuated civilians and academy students in one of the emergency bunkers, this one located within the Hokage monument. They were joined by the members of Clan Masaki along with Washu, Ryoko and Mihashi, who were the only non-villagers within the bunker, however were allowed access due to their importance and the fact that they were related to Naruto. Suddenly all of the rookies and Team Guy found themselves looking up as a squad of Chunin escorted Sasuke to the entrance of the bunker before turning and making their way back out. As he entered, many could see why the Uchiha hadn't competed earlier in the day due to the cast on his left hand, his dominant one. Sasuke. Kun, what happened? Questioned Sakura upon spotting the injury. TCH Kakashi and I were attacked by the Auto Nin on our way into the village this morning. One of them got lucky, managed to break my wrist and cause a minor fraction in my forearm. Where's the Dobi? Answered and questioned the Uchiha. Don't know, we were all ordered here as soon as the fighting started. Last anyone saw him he was in the arena with a bunch of Auto Nin surrounding him. Said Kiba with a frown. Before anyone could say anything else, the ground shook with force and a loud scream cut through the village. Eyes widening in shock, the genin as well as numerous Chunin and a curious Ryoko turned back through the entrance only to find the sight of a large tanuki facing the village, its size massive as it could be seen clearly even from the distance they had so far away. Kami. Sama, it's the Ichibi. Came the worried voice of one of the Chunin, fear dripping from his tone. So that's Shukaku, huh, impressive. Came a new voice causing many to turn to see Washu making her way out. You know what that thing is? Questioned Ryoko. It's one of the Biju we were told about, the Ichibi, Suna no Shukaku. Said the genius taking in the sight. Suddenly Hinata gasped, however before anyone except Neji could figure out why they were shocked, as there was suddenly a large plume of smoke which soon cleared to show a large red toad wearing a blue robe standing in front of the Biju. No way, it's Gamabunta. Exclaimed one of the Chunin, hope echoing from his tone. Gamabunta? Questioned Kiba. He's the boss of the Toad Summoning Clan. He is one of the most well-known summoning creatures and one of the strongest that we know of. Said Iruka, catching the attention of the genin along with Washu and Ryoko. Gamabunta hasn't been seen in 13 years, however. In fact, the last time he was seen was when Yondaime Sama summoned him to confront the Kyuubi. Finished the teacher, shocking the teens. Alright then, from this point on I'll accept you as a summoner and make sure you learn the ways of the family, Naruto. Came the voice of the toad echoing over the village. In another section of the village, the arena was still going through chaos as fighting was still taking place. Due to the number of cages and daimyo present, there were several strong individuals also in attendance for each of the villages to guard over all of the VIPs. While the Konoha shinobi were all fighting to defend their homes, the visiting shinobi were only moving to defend the dignitaries but had made no offensive movement thus far. For the visiting Kages, this was a very tense moment, for as it was they all knew if there was one wrong move, this invasion could literally spark the Fourth Shinobi War. While a few people wouldn't mind taking shots at the enemies of their respective villages, the Kages all knew that they had been invited for a reason, and all of them were not willing to make a move against the Leaf without knowing what that reason was. For Rasa, the Yondaime Kage, the situation was especially tense as he knew that he could be the linchpin that sparked a worse situation. While no one knew yet, the fact is he'd been in talks with the rogue Sannin just prior to receiving the invitation from the Hokage to his village, where a Gokage summit was to be held the day following the exams. It had really set things on pause, and he'd thought Orochimaru would have waited to strike. However, this invasion happening now meant that the man's spies had been unable to learn of the summit, otherwise he was sure the man would have been wise enough not to make such a foolish action. Meanwhile, inside the barrier, Orochimaru found himself on the defensive as he was currently fighting for his life. In truth, despite the invasion and his desire to see his old sensei dead, he had never had any intention of fighting him too long on his own. That had been the reason he'd summoned the two dead Hokages, not only to crush his spirit but so they could crush him physically. Unfortunately, even the best laid plans often go awry, and his had done so as soon as he had allowed Tobirama the time he needed to sever the connection that he held over the Edo Tensei. Now the roles had been seemingly reversed. He was trapped in a barrier opposing 4S class shinobi, and though it was his people maintaining the barrier, he would not order it dropped as long as Tsunade was pacing the thing, acting for all intents and purposes like an angry lioness. Sure, he was confident he could handle the Kunoichi and even Jiraiya, however he knew he could not do so and still go up against 3 Hokages even if his sensei was far out of his prime. Said old man was currently standing back and enjoying a conversation with the revived Shodai Hokage, who had wanted to know all he could about his nephew and great-nephew respectively. Learning that said nephew had become the Yondaime Hokage had caused the Shodai to swell with pride, and though he'd been able to hide it, Tobirama had felt said pride as well. Learning that Orochimaru had flown into a jealous rage over it and of the crimes said Sannin had committed in the aftermath, however, had sent said proud father into a rage, and Orochimaru was now feeling said War Master's wrath. However, unlike with most people when overcome with said emotion, the Senju did not lose control in face. He had become damn near emotionless, which was even worse for the Sannin. Suddenly all movement stopped as in the distance a large pillar had shot up into the air and had quickly formed the embodiment of fear for the people of Suna, the Ichibi itself. Damn it, Gaara, why now? Thought Rasa in annoyance, glaring over at the sight. You idiot! Exclaimed Tobirama upon spotting the massive creature turning to glare over at his brother. Hey, what are you mad at me for? Demanded Hashirama. Because you're the one who went and passed out the biju like they were fucking kanai. I told you this would happen, but did you listen? No. Relax, Toby, it's not like they'll turn around and use them as weapons against us. Now because of your naivete we've got a biju bearing down on us and we're trapped in this fucking barrier. There's no way we'll break it and be able to make it that way before that thing starts launching attacks at us. Exclaimed Tobirama, causing his brother to wilt. Before anything else could be said or done, however, there was a massive blast of smoke which quickly cleared to show a large toad nearly the same size of the giant tanuki. Alright then, from this point on I'll accept you as a summoner and make sure you learn the ways of the family, Naruto. Came the voice of the toad echoing over the village, shocking those gathered. Back in the forest, the two giant creatures eyed one another warily, each of them poised to strike. Gamabunta had drawn a tanto from the sheath at his side and held it in a ready stance as he searched for an opening. Naruto himself stood atop the head of the massive toad, thankful he'd been able to pull the move off like he had wanted to. He'd initially been caught off guard by the full transformation. In fact, he'd been so caught off guard Gaara had nearly managed to catch him within his desert coffin. While it had gotten too far for the blonde to escape by normal means, he'd managed to shatter it by summoning the Toad Boss, though he'd been trying for Gamaken, who had been the strongest he'd been able to summon so far during his training, but was pleasantly surprised by summoning the Boss Toad. Gaara, we don't have to do this. There is no problem between our villages, just calm down and we can go on about our day. Exclaimed Naruto, trying to talk the redhead down. For a moment things were silent and still before slowly Gaara's form emerged from the top of the sand biju so that he could be seen from the waist up. As they locked eyes, Naruto found himself freezing as Gaara's eyes in that moment reminded him of Haku's and of his own. I do not care for the villages. I will kill you for one reason only, because I want to. Came Gaara's response, his voice coming out with a double tone, the voice of both himself and of the biju he contained. What kind of fucked up logic is that? demanded Naruto, his pupils shifting into slits due to his anger. It is the only logic I need, one I'm sure you understand. You and I are the same, I can feel it, I knew the first time we met. You said you would show Kankuro what a real animal was. In that moment I knew you and I were the same, we are both monsters. As you can guess, I had a messed up childhood. I was brought into this world by taking the life of the woman I would have called my mother. To make me the ultimate shinobi, my father attached the incarnation of San Shukaku to me through ninjutsu. I was born a monster. I guess that's one way to show your son love. Mused Naruto, though already preparing himself to hear the worst. Love, don't judge me with such a feeble measuring stick. Family, all it is to me is pieces of meat connected to me through murderous intent and hatred. By sacrificing my mother's life I was to become the village's greatest masterpiece. As the Kage's son, he taught me the shinobi arts and I was spoiled and allowed to do whatever I please. I thought that was love, until the incident that changed everything, when I learned the truth. What happened? Questioned Naruto, dreading the answer. Since the day I turned 6 years old, my father has tried countless times to assassinate me. Naruto wasn't the only one to freeze at these words, for back within the village everyone else who'd been listening to the story had also froze, with those at the Hokage monument blanching at the words. Since they had started, they had been joined at the entrance by all of the visitors from space, with all the Chunin thankful that they couldn't be seen from this particular entrance. While the visitors and the genin were horrified that someone's parents could do such a thing, the expressions on the group of upper-level shinobi's faces had darkened as each of them reflected on the treatment of their own resident demon container. Meanwhile, in another portion of the village, the Kage himself found himself wilting under the combined glares of the resurrected Hokages and Miyako, telling him in no uncertain terms the level of harm they wished upon him. A being too strong as an existence to fear. Born through jutsu, my spirit was unstable, and it seems the idiots of the village finally realized that something was wrong. To the Kage, I was the village's trump card, but at the same time a dangerous existence, and by the time I was 6 it was determined I was too dangerous. As the village's dangerous tool, I was to be handled with care. To them I am simply a relic from the past that they wish would disappear. Then why am I alive? Why do I exist? For those questions I could find no answer. But as you know, to live you need a reason, otherwise it's the same as being dead. One day I came to a conclusion: I exist to kill every human aside from myself. I had finally found relief within the fear of death, of never knowing when someone would try to assassinate me. By continuing to kill the assassins, I understood the reason to keep on living. Fighting for yourself, living while loving only yourself. If you think that everyone else exists simply to allow you to experience that feeling, nothing is better than that world. As long as there are people in this world for me to kill, to keep enjoying that feeling of living, then my existence will not vanish. Finished Gaara while Naruto closed his eyes. Now make me feel alive. At these words, Naruto's eyes snapped open to find the large construct rushing forward. At the same time, Gamabunta surged forward. There was a flash, and suddenly the two giants stopped, engaged in a struggle. The Toad Boss's Tonto against the Biju's left arm. Narrowing his eyes, Gamabunta put all his strength behind the blade, which caused the blade to slice up and through the arm, with the Toad losing his grip on the blade and causing it to go flying, while the Biju staggered back. Leaping away, the Toad just barely managed to dodge the blow from the Biju's right arm before he leapt up into the air to gain some distance. Seeing this, Gaara placed his hands in a seal and for several moments was still before his body slumped forward, though still anchored in place by the sand surrounding his waist. Yes, I'm out. Look here, there's already someone here to kill. Came the voice of the sand demon. Suddenly it shot a ball of air from its mouth at quick speeds, which Gamabunta only just managed to dodge by taking to the air. Turning towards them, Shukaku fired 2 more air bullets, only for them to be blocked as Gamabunta spat out 2 water bullets in quick succession. What the two weren't prepared for was the 3rd air bullet that Shukaku had fired, which proceeded to strike the Toad Boss directly in the gut and causing him to fall to the ground, an impact that shook the entire village. He say goodbye. As he said this, Shukaku arched his head back as a large black ball of chakra began to gather before his mouth before compressing enough for him to swallow it. As he did so, Shukaku's mass increased exponentially before he exhaled a massive beam of pure power exploding from his mouth before descending on the summoned boss and causing a massive explosion. Haha, I killed him, who's next? On Jirai, a dead silence had come across the room, its occupants still watching the broadcast. Washu had apparently used mobile cameras as they had followed Naruto when he had exited the stadium and made his trek across the village. They had seen as he had used his stealth abilities to take out the invaders, and they'd watched him as he had battled Gaara, and even seen the confrontation with Shukaku before the beam it unleashed caused the cameras to white out when it struck the downed toad. Just what the hell is that thing? Questioned Kuramitsu Misao, fear coloring his tone. Naruto, please be okay, we just found you. Whispered Funaho, her body having gone rigid when the beast unleashed the blast. Tatsuki Itsuko had also gone rigid at the sight and held Misaki's hand in a death grip as she waited for the screen to clear. Though she had never met him, she couldn't stomach the idea that she had just witnessed the death of her great grandson, and if she had, she would be going down to Furia herself, and damn the rules. However, as the smoke cleared, she found herself along with everyone else gasping in awe. Back on Furia, the group of genin were looking on in shock at the wall of smoke that blocked their view. Hinata herself had collapsed to her knees and had been caught luckily by Iruka before she could hit the ground. Despite this, her eyes did not leave the cloud of smoke, and she did nothing to remove her gaze from it, as she hoped beyond anything that her crush had survived, unknowing of the trail of tears that fell from her eyes. Dobi? Breathed Sasuke in shock before that shock turned to anger and his Sharingan flared to life, spinning with his fury before stopping, showing a trio of Tomo resting within each eye. Naruto? Breathed Sakura, collapsing into Ino's arms as the blonde held her friend who was crying heavily. Sasami herself had gone rigid, yet her eyes had turned hard as she focused outwards. Her body shook with anger and she was barely holding back on summoning her own ship and wiping the sand beast out of existence herself. She, along with everyone else, however, was soon given the answer and was soon gazing upon the scene before them in awe. Back in the forest, Shukaku had stopped his celebration as the smoke had begun to clear. As it did, it revealed a sight that shocked the tailed beast into silence. The Toad Boss and his summoner both stood unharmed from the attack. However, that wasn't the most shocking thing concerning this, as just in front of them was what appeared to be a shield of pure energy that had held up to his technique. The shield itself was made up of seemingly separate arcs of energy with Naruto at their center. Two of these arcs began at his shoulders and shot upwards, while another began at his waist and shot downward, covering the entirety of Gamabunta's body, at least the center of it. Two more took up space on his left and right, shooting downward at an angle to cover the portions of the Toad Boss the center on mist. Finally, there was two additional pairs shooting out to his sides, forming to arcs on each side, all in all a total of 9 arcs. From his position atop the Toad Boss, Naruto's eyes burned a crimson red with a vertical slit pupil as he eyed the Biju. "Goodbye, Shukaku," said Naruto, his voice echoing out with a double tone as if two voices spoke out at once. Suddenly the arcs at his sides separated and shot outwards, now showing 4 individual arcs and leaving Naruto with 5 for protection. Faster than the tailed beast could react, the arcs shot forward, each one cutting through his 3 remaining limbs and his tail, leaving the tailed beast hovering for only a moment. Suddenly there were several flashes of light as the arcs shot all around the Biju before shooting back to Naruto and rejoining his shield before the shield faded away, its purpose complete. For a moment all was silent and still before the Biju construct crumbled, leaving the now awake Gaara to free-fall. Gamabunta lost the last of his energy at just that moment and dispelled as well the explosion, pushing Gaara so that he landed on a rather thick branch while Naruto did the same. The blonde himself was panting heavily and sweat covered his form, yet his once again blue eyes did not break their gaze with Gaara's shocked green ones. As they regarded each other, the two of them realized at the exact same time that they were both completely spent and this fight was basically over. Gamabunta's Tonto chose just that moment to dispel, and as if it was a signal, the two genin shot towards the other, leaping off their respective branches, each determined to emerge the victor. The decision, however, was shown quickly, as while both had their fist strike the other in the jaw, Gaara's had barely affected Naruto, whose only reaction was the turning of the cheek, while Naruto's had sent Gaara flying backwards. The two fell to the ground at the same time, Gaara on his back and Naruto on his front. Gaara found himself unable to move the pain he felt leaving his body, incapable of following his mind's directions. Naruto, however, was used to pain, and though it took him a bit of struggle, he managed to push himself to his hands and knees and then to his feet. As he moved forward, it was clear that he was damaged significantly, as he moved with a limp and his left arm was cradled and he was doing his best not to move it. To Gaara, however, it was no longer the blonde he'd been fighting that was approaching him, but the Shinigami himself. "Stay back. My existence will not end, I won't allow it," exclaimed Gaara, watching fearfully as the blonde continued to approach before he stopped and sat himself down heavily. "How are you so strong?" questioned Gaara after a few minutes of silence. "You were right, the two of us are the same. For a long time I had no idea why I existed at all. All I knew was that the vast majority of the villagers hated me, even my own teachers at the academy, and in truth deep down I hated them too. For a long time I only cared about myself. I had no parents or even any idea who they were. Hell, for all I knew they had left me in this hell. For a while after the orphanage put me out, I lived on the street doing whatever I had to do to survive. Then one day I met this guy. He found me digging through the garbage behind his shop, and despite everything I had believed up until then, he invited me into his shop and fed me. His name is Tucci. He invited me into his home and cleaned me up and even introduced me to his daughter Ayame. He told me I never had to steal again, or dig through trash for a meal, that I would always be welcome in his shop and in his home. The next day he had brought the Hokage to see me, and before I knew it I had a new apartment and fresh clothes and running water, and he would bring me food once a week. To this day I go back to that shop every day, where he always has a bowl of ramen ready for me and his daughter always welcomed me with a smile. One day I decided I was going to become a shinobi, but through the academy, unlike the rest of my class, one never had a reason as to why. You're supposed to love the village or make your clan proud or whatever. I had no clan and I really didn't care for the village. I just thought it would be cool to be able to breathe fire or create hurricanes and tsunamis from nothing, so I thought, why not become Hokage? That way I'll know the best techniques and be the strongest around. I still didn't have a purpose, a reason for my existence, so I spent most of my time pulling pranks since those were fun. The academy was boring and most of the teachers would kick me out anyway before I even did anything. Then one day not that long ago I met a girl. Her name was Haku. She was different than every girl I had met to that point. She was just like me, and looking back I guess it's not surprising I fell for her so easily. One day she came to me while I was training and she told me something. She said, "When you have something to protect, that's when you become truly strong." She died 2 days later when a coward by the name of Gato shot her through the chest with a crossbow bolt, and I of course killed Gato in retaliation. For the first time I could understand the villagers' hatred of me, as misguided as it was. There I was, having just watched the girl I had come to love dying and having avenged her, yet I felt nothing after claiming retribution. Sure, Gato was dead, but so was Haku, and I had been just a few seconds too late to save her. It was only later, that after I buried her and stood before her grave, that I realized something. Though she was gone, I still have Tucci and Ayame. Now I have Sasami and Hinata. I have Kakashi, who despite his perverted tendencies is the closest thing I have to an uncle. I have my teammate Sakura, who I just found out is my cousin, and Sasuke, even if he's a bastard and an Uchiha. I have the old man Hokage, who has been there for me at any time I need him. I have my mother's family, who have crossed the vastness of space itself when they learned of my existence. I have a demented old lady who turns out to be my dad's mother, who pushes me harder in training than even I thought was possible. I have this village which my family built, which my parents sacrificed themselves to save. Most importantly, I have the fox who has kept me alive against all odds for the last 13 years, despite how we came to be together. You say you exist to kill. I exist to protect all those I hold dear and to deliver the wrath of the Kyuubi himself to all those who would threaten them. Finished the blonde, his eyes once again becoming slitted, and for just an instant Gaara could see it, the form of the Kyuubi in all its terrifying might crouched over the blonde and roaring out, accepting any and all challengers to its might. Naruto. Gaara. The cries came from two separate sources as four individuals landed within the clearing. On one hand you had Kakashi and Guy, who had leapt from the trees and landed in front of the blonde protectively. On the other you had Kankuro and Tamari, who had done the same for Gaara, standing defensively before their younger brother. Love, huh? Is that why he's so strong? Mused Gaara out loud. Let them go, said Naruto as soon as the two Chunin had shifted. Naruto, we can't just, started Guy, only to be cut off. As far as I know, we have no problem with Suna. This was between me and Gaara, it was something I had to see to on my own, said Naruto. I understand, said Kakashi, and he did. The truth was Naruto had expressed his concerns about Gaara to Jiraiya prior to the main matches. Earlier in the day, while Naruto had been facing the Sunagenin in the arena, Jiraiya had in turn relayed those concerns to Kakashi. Naruto and Gaara were two sides of the same coin, and Naruto had wondered which of the two had been right in their decisions. This meeting was something that both of them had needed to see through to exorcise their demons. Take your brother and return to your hotel. Guy will escort you so you don't have any trouble, said Kakashi before picking up his student and surrogate nephew and placing him on his back before leaping away. Watching him go for a moment longer, Tamari and Kankuro soon turned their attention to their sibling, lifting him up and balancing him out on each of their shoulders as they followed after Guy on their way back to the village. Kankuro, Tamari, I'm sorry for everything. said Gaara softly, getting looks of shock from his siblings before they turned into small smiles. It didn't take long for Kakashi to make it back to the village, where he found that things were already settling back down. The invasion was over once Shukaku had made its appearance. Most of the Oto Nin that hadn't been killed had turned tail and ran. Anbu was out in force, and Kakashi soon found himself surrounded with his own escort as they entered the village gates. "So what's going on?" questioned Kakashi. "Wrap up, senpai. Most of the invaders have been put down. Unfortunately, Orochimaru managed to escape after the tailed beast ball was fired. Tsunade, Sama and Jiraiya. Sama nearly had them, but one of his guards managed to catch them in some kind of webbing which gave them just enough time to escape," explained a Neko masked operative with long purple hair. "Kakashi. Senpai just received word that Hokage Sama wants you to report to him after dropping Naruto Kun at the hospital. We've already got a room and a guard set up for him," explained a bull-masked operative. Much later in the day found the Hokage and his 2 remaining loyal students standing before a full shinobi council, or the War Council as it was often called. Also in attendance was the daimyo of the Land of Fire and the most prominent of available Chunin as additions to the usual numbers. For the most part, the Hokage was pleased that things had worked as well as they had for their village, while there was some damage. Loss of life wasn't massive as it would have been had they been caught completely unaware. The village also hadn't been hit with the full brunt of the invading troops. Prior to the fighting, he'd sent the Hyuga, Aburame and Inuzuka clans out in force to root out those who could cause problems, like summoning giant snakes on the village. Civilian casualties had also been minimized as evacuation had started prior to the actual invasion. In fact, it had started during Naruto and Gaara's match. There was a bit of damage to buildings and the roads, but not anything completely irreparable for the most part. Unfortunately, our person of interest Yakushi Kabuto managed to escape as well, said Morino Ibiki, finishing his report. "Do we have any knowledge on where they will go?" questioned Hiruzen. Well, as part of her integration package, young Karen was happy to provide us with a detailed map of what she knew of the base in Ricefield Country. Unfortunately, he's got bases built everywhere, so tracking him may be difficult, said Ibiki. "Alright, what about our shinobi? How did they fare?" questioned the Hokage. "As of now, we've got 100 confirmed injuries. 60% of them are minor. Of those 100, however, 20 are now confirmed Kia. Those numbers could have been higher, but Naruto's hellhounds made some appearances and many that could have been lost got some lucky saves," explained Nara Shikaku. "Alright, for now I want to put the village on lockdown. Nobody gets in and no one gets out. Let him squirm for now. I want to focus on defense for the meeting tomorrow," said Hiruzen. "Are you serious? We're attacked and you want to let them run and hide so they can try again?" questioned Danzo, his tone incredulous. "You're right, Danzo. We were attacked today. I was sealed into a barrier where I was unable to help any of my shinobi. Kakashi, Guy, Asuma and Kurenai along with Kaharu and Homura were all in the arena fighting for their lives. Everyone in this room has spilled blood today, but during all of this, where were you?" questioned Hiruzen, causing a hush to come over the room, with Danzo narrowing his good eye. "I know where you were. While we were all fighting for our lives, you were hiding underground in your own personal bunker with the root ninja that I had ordered to be shut down. How do I know this? Because the Shodai himself told me so after he was freed from the control of the Edo Tensei when someone questioned your whereabouts. You, who had once been my rival and claimed to want to wear the hat of Hokage, were hiding while we were all out fighting, and a genin was out there fighting the Ichibi. In fact, I know you weren't in the arena at all today, so let me tell you that if I discover that you had anything at all to do with this, or even any forewarning it would happen, there will be no trial, no imprisonment, simply an execution. As it is the only reason you are in this room is because I don't trust you outside of my sight. You will not stir up cries of war when you are too much of a coward to even defend our home," said Hiruzen, focusing all of his ire and killing intent onto the man who could only grit his teeth as his eyes narrowed on the Hokage, who turned his attention away from him. "Kakashi, how is Naruto holding up?" questioned Hiruzen after a few moments of silence. Level 3 chakra exhaustion, his left forearm was broken and he sprained his right ankle. The medics are waiting for his chakra to recover before giving any kind of time estimate for his recovery considering his healing factor, explained Kakashi. "I'll take care of the injuries when we leave here, however the chakra exhaustion should be recovered from naturally," said Tsunade, reminding everyone of her presence. She had been silent throughout the entirety of the meeting, and her mind had actually been more on the talk that she'd had with her grandfather after Orochimaru had run away than on the happenings with the meeting. She had explained to him about the decimation of the clan and that as far as she had known she was the last one left and that she left the village after her brother Nawaki had been killed. He had listened to her as she spoke and then had offered his own counsel regarding the subject. She remembered that her grandfather had spoiled her rotten when she was a child, but he was surprisingly mature when he needed to be. He had offered her the advice that the best place for her to be was in the village. After all, it had been policy that had in the end had cost her brother his life, and she couldn't affect policy outside of the village. Alright, now on to the last order of business. After the meeting tomorrow and after the various leaders have left the village, we will begin the process of selecting a new Hokage. Stated Hiruzen, shocking everyone with these words. Or you could skip the hassle and name me your successor now. Stated Tsunade, surprising everyone who knew her stance on the village. Are you sure about this? Questioned Hiruzen. There is no better choice. Jiraiya has his spy network and can't remain in the village for long periods of time. Danzo, as you have said, is apparently a coward. No one will respect him if it comes out he didn't lift a finger to help today. He can never become Hokage. That leaves Kakashi as the most likely choice. However, he has a genin team and I doubt he even wants the job. However, I do want it. There are certain things that need to be done and I can only make sure they're done if I'm the one in charge. Said Tsunade. Very well. After the summit I will begin training Tsunade to take over as Hokage over the next few months. In 6 months' time she will be Hokage. Within a large house a group of children could be seen playing around the sitting room while a group of adults looked on. The oldest child was a boy with deep blue eyes and bright, wavy blonde hair which flares out on the sides, and an ahoge that which resembles the stem of a leaf. His face was a bit round in shaping and he had 2 whisker-like markings on his each cheek. He wore a pair of green shorts and a white shirt with a large spiral on the front and had a bright smile on his face. Beneath him on the floor a little girl was laughing and squirming as she was currently being tickled. She had short dark blue hair with straight bangs with an ahoge at the top and 2 whisker-like markings on each of her cheeks. When they opened, her eyes revealed themselves to pale blue in color and lacking pupils, and was wearing yellow shorts and a matching top. Across from them, engaged in their own tickle war, were 2 more children, one a girl with light teal colored hair tied in pigtails that went to her shoulders and deep violet eyes. She also possessed 2 whisker-like markings on each cheek and wore a pair of blue shorts and a white top. The last child possessed deep fiery red hair that was pulled into a ponytail and deep blue eyes. He, like the rest of the children, had 2 whisker-like markings on each cheek and wore a pair of white shorts and a purple shirt. Watching them from their places on a large couch, 3 women could be seen smiling. Suddenly another figure entered the room, this one being a large fox about the size of a wolf with bright orange fur and 9 tails, which caused the children to squeal in delight, which caused the fox to chuckle. "Oh, where's my love?" questioned a voice, causing the children to look up. The person before them was a man with short spiky blonde hair and deep blue eyes. He wore a pair of black pants and sandals along with a black uniform style jacket with an orange zipper that features several buttons on the waist and sleeves, allowing him to fold up the left sleeve and rear coattails, giving him easy access to the pouches on the back of his belt. He wears a red armband with an Uzumaki crest on his left arm, while his right one was covered completely in bandages, which was supporting a large box. Atop his head rested an elastic band with a metal plate with the Konoha insignia imprinted on it, and finally he wore a white sleeveless haori decorated with orange flames rising from the bottom and the triangular hat with the kanji for fire that marked him as Hokage. "Daddy!" exclaimed the children before the man was rushed. The man laughed as his kids all rushed him, as he knew it was rare for him to be able to make it home this early lately. The screams, however, attracted the attention of a trio of women who entered the room only to smile upon seeing the man. "Naruto! Kun, you're early!" exclaimed one of the women. "Paperwork can wait, I wanted to spend some time with my family," said the man, getting all 3 women to smile, as did the kids. "Now as for you lot, I've been talking with Kurama and we think it's about time you each got a hound of your own," said Naruto, getting the kids to look up with wide excited eyes. "However, you've got to earn them, are you up to it?" questioned Naruto, getting eager nods from the kids. "Alright, your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to help Daddy prank Uncle Kiba." At these words all the kids developed mischievous grins to match their fathers. Yamada Niju awoke with a smile to the early morning sun. The future was looking up. There was still a lot that people did not know, even though the shinobi system as it existed today had been in place for almost a century and the shinobi clans themselves had existed for generations before that. The Biju, a group of 9 superior beings who had earned the moniker, demons, without any real fault of their own, were the greatest mystery to shinobi. The Biju were actually chakra constructs that, for reasons no one could understand, had acquired their own form and consciousness. They were thought of as tools or weapons that the 5 great villages could use as they pleased, despite the fact that everyone knew they were power incarnate due to greed and a never-ending desire for power. Every one of the 9 was associated with a legend that said the number of tails on them represented their power or the order in which they were created. According to other legends, they were sentient manifestations of negative emotions. Naturally, the great majority of the legends and the purported facts that supported them were utterly false. However, there was one thing about the Biju that no one knew, and the Biju themselves had no intention of anyone finding out. The secret in question was that, regardless of their physical state at any given time, they could all telepathically communicate with one another. They actually met in a different plane where nobody could guess where they were talking. That was exactly what was going on at the moment, or more accurately, 8 of them were laughing hysterically while the 9th one pouted and scowled. Shukaku cried out, his scowl more akin to a pout, "Shut up, it's not funny." Another of the tailed beasts, this one shaped like a big ape with red fur and 4 tails, exclaimed, "It's hilarious." The 6-tailed slug growled, "All that tough talk, and you get your ass kicked by a 13-year-old brat." The 8-tailed Biju said gravely, "We still have to acknowledge that the kid is unique. I've never seen a technique like that last one he pulled, nor anything that could stand up to a Bijudama." The twin-tailed cat asked, "True enough, and he descends from Asura's line, doesn't he?" The fox said, "He does, he is both Uzumaki and Senju." The 5-tailed dolphin horse said, "This isn't the first time the lines have crossed. That's how those sub-element bloodlines came about." The 4 tails, who were also now acting seriously, asked, "That brat is too dangerous, how long do you plan on letting him live?" At this point, the fox caught everyone's attention by saying, "I have no intention of killing him. He intrigues me. However, I did call you all here to speak about him." Then, abruptly, the fox sat up. Unaware of the ongoing meeting, Naruto was discovered elsewhere, having just finished getting dressed, inside Konoha's hospital. He had slept soundly since he had only woken up once during the night to be informed that the battle was over and they had prevailed. Having woken up earlier in the day, he had barely managed to exit his private bathroom when he was confronted by Kakashi, who had requested a thorough explanation, which he was fortunately able to provide. Following Kakashi's departure, he attempted to leave as well, but was essentially forced back inside by 2 Anbu who had been stationed outside his window. Since he had no intention of lying down in a hospital and there were others who could and did need the room more than he did, he reasoned that he could rest at home, even though the doctors wanted to keep him longer due to his chakra exhaustion. Luckily, Kakashi had brought along an extra set of clothes for the blonde, since the ones he was wearing had been completely destroyed in the battle with Gaara. Despite receiving treatment for his ankle and a reset of his left forearm bone, he was still under strict orders to rest because he was experiencing mild chakra exhaustion. Neither of these injuries had fully healed. But because his healing was dependent on chakra, which he was currently lacking, this was the result of his chakra exhaustion. From behind him came the question, "Naruto-kun, what are you doing?" Which made him stiffen in his desk chair. He turned to see Hinata and Sasami, who both had concerned expressions on their faces. But Hinata seemed to have a little girl with her, who was probably Hanabi, her younger sister. Washu and Irie were also present. It was his green-haired grandmother who had made the initial statement. "Checking out. I've got a few things I need to do today. First I need some real food, then I need to go check up on Ayame, Nei and Tucci." "Gigi," the blonde replied. With a frown, Sasami said, "You should be resting." The blonde shrugged and said, "I'm not confined to bed rest. I just can't do anything strenuous until I finish healing up." Naruto sighed as Washu said, "They're fine, they were among the first to be evacuated in Ayame. Chan wanted me to tell you not to do anything stupid. Your mother never liked sitting around either, said it made her feel like an invalid. Come on, we'll go back to the house and you can rest while Lady Washu runs her own tests," Irie said as she rubbed the blonde's head. As they started to leave, the blonde asked, "What time is the meeting today?" With a nod from Naruto, Washu said, 3 o'clock here and pushed it back after everything that happened yesterday. Kiba was seen wiping his hands on a towel inside the Inuzuka compound after finishing up with his breakfast plate. He took cleanliness very seriously, in spite of all the jokes and the misconception among his graduating class that he was an Inuzuka with a great sense of smell. Upon glancing at the clock on his right, he realized he had an hour remaining until he needed to arrive at the mission office. This implied he had 45 minutes to meet his team. With all the excitement between the matches and the invasion, he hadn't spoken to his mother at all yesterday, so he was hoping she had forgotten about him fighting in the underground. It wasn't likely, but he held out hope. Kiba. His mother's voice behind him made him freeze and tense. He sighed as he called the woman, telling her to come sit down. She wanted to talk, which wasn't good. He went to the table and sat down across from her after setting the towel on the rack above the sink to dry. I've been hearing lots of things about you for the last 24 hours. Every time someone comes up to me, no matter what conversation we had, they always said, your son gave a good fight. I'm proud of you, pup. The woman said to Kiba. That said, you actually impressed a lot of people with how you fought yesterday. So no matter what happens, promotion or no promotion, we'll be stepping up your training. If you're to succeed me as Alpha, we should start training you now. Sume said as Kiba was nearly choking on. Kiba said, Alpha, I thought Hana. But Sume shook her head negatively. Hana will have a different role, but no less important. I've sent in a betrothal request for her with Naruto. Stated Sume. W. What? Kiba cried, his eyes widening as he revealed to his mother that he was unaware of it. Naruto turned it down, gave some excuse about animals having bad reactions to him. Your father, however, thinks he turned it down for you. Sume replied. With apparent confusion, Kiba said, I don't get it. Naruto grew up an orphan and practically raised himself. Because of this, he values his bonds higher than most. His friendship and loyalty to you will not let him do something that he thinks would be a betrayal of that bond. Does Hana know about this? Kiba asked, his thoughts racing. His head snapped over the door of the room, and then his sister's voice said, shocking him even more, I asked for it. Moving in and taking her own seat at the table, Hana said, after the meeting where Naruto's heritage was announced, I pulled Mom aside and asked her to set up the arrangement. Why? Kiba inquired. I'm not alpha material, Kiba, I know that. Even with the way our clan works, everyone pretty much assumes I'll be the next alpha. I'm not a leader, Kiba, and I'm not comfortable trying to do so. I'm comfortable in the clinic healing. By marrying outside of the clan and into another one, I can escape and still be of use to the clan, just in a different way. Explained Hana. Kiba said, obviously frustrated by the conversation, but why Naruto? I mean, he's my age. His mother was well over 200 years old when she passed during the Kyuubi attack. According to what I've read from the packet they gave Mom, once we officially join the Jirai Empire, all of our lifespans will increase drastically. We could all live to be well over 1,000 years old unless killed in battle. I don't think a 5-year age gap will make much of a difference. Said Hana caused Kiba's head to impact the table. Kiba, look at it this way. With Hana doing this, it would basically make you and Naruto brothers. Sume replied. Hana, do you have any idea what you're asking for? Naruto is going to have more than one wife, are you really willing to step into that? Asked Kiba. I'm aware, the current emperor has 2 wives. His cousin Tenchi has 4 finances, Yamada Sena the other heir has 4 wives as well. Hana replied. 5, that Kabut that Niju always has is one of Washu's daughters, when she gets older she'll look very similar. She's Sena's 5th wife. Kiba replied. Really? Sume asked, looking surprised. Yay, her older sister Ryo. Oki is always with Sasami. Naruto told me she has another form that looks like a little girl, maybe 5 or 6. Said Kiba in a surprise to both women. Kiba said, getting up from his seat and walking away from the table. I'll talk to Naruto, get him to at least consider it again. But Hana, you have to find him and talk to him too. Sasami and Hinata had to convince him to accept their betrothals. The young man said, I have to meet my team. I'll see you guys later. Sitting serenely in the spacious compound, Hyuga Hanabi observed those surrounding her. Her mind was racing frantically, trying to figure out exactly what to make of things, despite the way she appeared. She'd been under the impression for a few years now that everyone was predestined and could not be changed. There were winners and losers. Nobility acted in one way and commoners in another. But everything she had been taught to believe was contradicted by what these people did and said. The boy who had accompanied Uzumaki Naruto here was the most obvious case. She recalled that a few years prior, she and her caregiver had witnessed him being yelled at by a stall owner in the village, who had referred to him as a curse on the community. She recalled her caretaker Natsu telling her not to talk to him at all during that period. "Ryo, thank you for your thoughts," she heard someone say next to her. When she looked up, she saw Heir, the woman with the green hair. "I'm confused. None of this makes any sense. Everyone has a destiny, mine is to protect the Hyuga. Hinata. Wanisama is a failure, Uzumaki Naruto is an outcast, yet they betrothed Mayoni Sama to him and celebrate when before we weren't to so much as speak to him." Hanabi said quietly. Heir shocked Hanabi with the news, saying, "Naruto-kun, he's the son of the Yondaime Hokage and the grandson of the Nidaime Hokage. His mother, my daughter, was a princess. The day they died their last act was to seal the Kyuubi inside of Naruto, the same day he was born. Their hope was that he would learn to use its power to protect the village. The problem is the villagers wanted someone to blame. Most of them have no idea about what caused the attack, only that the fox was sealed inside Naruto, so they blame him," stated Heir. Hanabi responded, "But that's not his fault. Just as it is no fault of Hinata Chan's that your clan elders think she's weak. Hinata Chan is kind, in fact she is the kindest person I've ever met. Your clan elders believe that it's a weakness, but sometimes someone showing just a single act of kindness can be the greatest strength. The reason Naruto accepted the betrothal wasn't because of anything your clan elders think, he doesn't care for your bloodline limit at all. He accepted because Hinata has always been kind to him, one of the few people in his life to ever be so with no ulterior motive. It's that same kindness that has affected your life. If she had not been so kind and changed her own destiny, can you honestly say that you would be your clan's next leader? You won your spar because Hinata Chan let you, your father knows this. It earned your sister the ridicule of certain members of your clan, sure, but you now get top-notch training. Hinata Chan did her job in protecting you, she's never doubted that was the right decision," explained Heir. In another area of the compound, in the subspace that Washu had made to access her laboratory, Naruto was seen reclined in a chair similar to one seen in a dentist's office, but without arms. Washu was doing tests on him, and several wires were attached to her. Washu broke the silence that had fallen over the room, saying, "Well, this is interesting. Enough so I can go eat?" Naruto asked in a hopeful tone. Washu hopped out of her seat and said, "Sure, come on." Naruto swiftly left his and followed her out of the room. When they emerged from the lab, they discovered a very crowded house. Not only were the usual suspects seated inside, but Jiraiya, Shizune, and Tsunade were also present, along with Hinata and Hanabi, whom they had personally invited. The Haruno family, who had also been invited to breakfast, was also present. Most of the conversation stopped as soon as the two came out of the lab because everyone was staring at the unusually serious Washu. "What's wrong?" Ryoko Hakuba asked, noticing the expression on her face, but she was also making plans to flee if necessary. Washu said as she took a seat, "Breakfast first, business later." Hinata blushed hotly as Naruto sat down to her left at that exact moment. He also chose that moment to take a seat. If nothing else, Naruto would acknowledge to himself that he relished the reaction the Hyuga heiress would have to his mere presence. Thanks to Yosho's knowledge dump, he realized that, contrary to what his old self had assumed, she was just really crushing on him. Speaking of crushes, he wished someone had taken the time to talk to him about those kinds of things sooner because, in ignorance, he had mistakenly believed that his connection to Sakura was entirely different from what it was. Gradually, the conversation resumed, and soon everybody was talking again, except for Washu, who was still lost in thought. Jiraiya asked the blonde, standing across from him, "So, Gaki, how are you feeling?" Naruto shrugged and said, "Not too bad, I figure once I eat my fill I should be good as new." "You suffered level 3 chakra exhaustion that should put you down for a few days, you shouldn't even be out of the hospital." Tsunade sighed. Naruto Dono's body is special. His body turns food into energy at a phenomenal rate. Before he used to gorge himself on at least 20 bowls of ramen in order to maintain his energy output. Because of this I created a special formula that when included with his food allow him to regain his energy with less intake. According to Washu. Similar to the Akamichi clan then. Their bodies automatically convert fat into chakra. Jiraiya thought. Washu stated, Naruto is a much more advanced case. The energy he creates affects his entire body, not just his chakra network. His brain processes with nearly 5 times the power of the average Jirians. According to the records I've been able to get my hands on, it's the exact same as his mother's. Tsunade made a stony face as the room abruptly cooled. Tsunade said, those words never left your mouth and you will never mention it again. Just as a tremendous pressure started to fill the room, she spoke. Jiraiya put a hand on Tsunade Heim's shoulders and said, you should relax. Everyone in this room knows him, and no one would like to see him hurt. Perhaps not, but there are certain things that should never be said, or learned. As both Senju and Uzumaki, I myself have to make sure certain secrets stay that way. I'm certain the 2 Hyuga girls understand. It would be like someone trying to tell secrets of the Byakugan in front of them. Tsunade replied. Aika asked, can these things really be that bad if learned? The Uzumaki clan was attacked and their home destroyed by 3 of the 5 great villages for what those people thought the Uzumaki were capable of. If anyone actually knew, they wouldn't try to kill him, they'd experiment on him in order to replicate it for themselves. That is the world we live in and why people are killed simply for attempting to leak those secrets. Tsunade replied. I see. Yosho nodded, understandingly crossing his arms over his chest, his tone calm. Ni. Sama? Aika asked. It dawned on those who understood that the Jirian people were particularly paranoid about tree ships, which is why Yosho explained, her worry is understandable. For her those secrets are of the same importance, if not more so, as the secrets of Jirian tree ships. Do not misunderstand. I have no problem with you all learning those secrets in time. However, that time is not now. Naruto is only 13. Such secrets would not be divulged to him until such time as he was properly groomed to take over as clan head. Furthermore, such secrets cannot be given to you until such time as Naruto marries. Those are the laws for both Senju and Uzumaki clans. Tsunade clarified. Tsunade scowled as Seto asked, would those same rules not apply then for Minato and Ichika? I suppose. As Ichika and Kushina merged, they technically became the same person, meaning the Keki Genkai would have been spread to both bodies. I know for a fact that she told Minato after they married, Genkai. Sensei, you were already aware of it, correct? Mused Tsunade before turning the question to the pink-haired woman in her elder appearance. I am, however I believe they already know. Prior to either of our arrivals in the village, Naruto had already undergone a physical with Washu. San said they already have a good idea of most of the effects, just not the cause, which I believe Washu San has just discovered. Said the elder woman, causing Tsunade to frown. I see, I had not known of that. Naruto, you should know I am now your primary physician. Anything you need medically, you come to me first. If I'm not available, then you go to Shizune. Outside of that, if you consented, then Washu San would be free to run her test, but only if she consents to being your physician when you head to Jirai. Said Tsunade. You're not going? Questioned Naruto, finally breaking his silence. It hasn't been announced yet outside of the Shinobi Council, so keep this a secret. In 6 months' time I'll be taking over as Hokage. As such, as much as I would like to join you, I unfortunately cannot. Explained Tsunade. Well, while I'm more of a scientist, I did do some work as a nurse. It's been quite some time, but I can look after Naruto Dono's health. Said Washu. Still, I'm surprised it's that serious to need a private doctor. Said Sena. All clan heirs have private doctors. Because of the specialized needs and secrets regarding clans, we need them. I had one as well growing up. I'm sure both Hinata and Hanabi have one, and Naruto always had one, however he retired after the invasion. Explained Tsunade. What does that mean for me? I've never had a private doctor, I usually see whoever is available. Said Sakura. Before we make the announcement of your heritage, I'll have your records sealed. As with Naruto, I'll be your private doctor and Shizune your secondary. Said Tsunade. Food's ready. Came the call from the kitchen in Sasama's cheerful voice. With that announcement and the arrival of the food supported by Sasama, Noik and Mihashi, it brought an end to the serious atmosphere. Breakfast had turned out to be a feast of epic proportions, and Tsunade had to admit she hadn't tasted such wonderful cooking in quite a while. As she'd spent the last decade constantly moving from one place to another, high-quality meals had become a rarity for her and Shizune. Many, however, had been surprised when the Senju woman had eaten almost as much as Naruto. Washu wasn't having a greater idea now of how Naruto's and Tsunade's bodies worked thanks to the tests she'd run. By the time they finished, Naruto was leaning back, an air of contentment escaping him as he patted his now full stomach. "So Washu-chan, have you figured out how Naruto's able to create his own light hawk wings?" questioned Aika. "The tests were inconclusive," stated the scientist, surprising several people. "But you have a theory," said Seto, her eyes narrowed. "Of course, the last time this happened it was with Tenchi." "Dono. So I know he's a potential, just not if he's actually a higher level," stated Washu. "What do you mean by potential?" questioned Tsunade with a frown. "He is potentially a higher level existence, or in simple terms a god. The shield he created in the battle against Shukaku was composed of 9 light hawk wings, which are generally known as the ultimate shield. In truth, however, light hawk wings are manifestations of energy from a higher plane of existence. Light hawk wings take a phenomenal amount of energy to create due to their nature, and can usually only be created by Jireian tree ships due to their connection with tsunami, and even then can only summon 3 at most," explained Washu. "Who?" questioned Jiraiya. "Tsunami. Kami. Sama is one of the Shushin, the 3 goddesses who created the universe," said Irie. "The 3 goddesses in time came to believe in the existence of a higher level being, one that was beyond even them. They altered time and space in order to create anomalies that would either make this being appear or create one. They succeeded, and people appeared who possessed the ability to manifest their own lighthawk wings, who are known as potentials," explained Washu. Several hours later found a group of people sitting within Konoha's council chambers. The atmosphere itself was tense, as the most powerful men in the elemental nations had all been gathered together within one room for the first time ever. The 5 cages themselves were each in attendance, all of them with 2 bodyguards apiece, aside from the requested guest that the Sandaime Hokage had specified to the village leaders. For most, just seeing the 5 cage in the same room together was a sight they thought they wouldn't see. However, to be joined by the leader of Taki and the daimyos of each represented village said quite a bit. However, the addition of the leader of the samurai run Tetsu no Kuni had many anxious to know what the Hokage had called this meeting for. "I thank all of you for making the journey for this meeting and for your patience regarding its delay," said Hiruzen, breaking the silence that had come over the room. "After yesterday's events, a little delay is understandable, Hokage. Dono," stated the case cage. "Before we can truly begin, there is another group of individuals I will invite inside so that any of your questions can be answered," said the Hokage, making several people frown but nod their consent all the same. Seeing this, the Hokage simply made a motion with his hands, allowing for the door to open. As it did, 4 people made their way inside, many raising their eyebrows, finding one of those people was the young blonde they'd seen the previous day competing in the Chunin exams. The cages themselves, however, watched him intently, knowing now of whom exactly he was, grandson to the Nidaime Hokage. "Before anything is said, there is something that must be done, that was requested of me by one of our guests," stated Naruto, looking towards the Hokage, whose eyes narrowed though he nodded. Naruto said nothing, merely walking over to his sensei, who was acting as the Hokage's guard. Speaking quietly so only the man himself could hear him, and turning his back so no one could read his lips, he told him of the request. For several moments they stared at each other before the copy ninja moved forward, causing several to tense slightly as he raised his hite, revealing his Sharingan eye. Looking eyes with that of his target, he made 2 quick seals before voicing his command. Kai. The effect was instant as the Mizukage suddenly slumped in his seat, breathing heavily. His guards, seeing this, moved to draw weapons, only to stop as the man himself raised a hand to stop them. "How did you know about the genjutsu?" questioned the Mizukage. "You may not have been able to tell anyone, but that didn't extend to Isobu," said Naruto, causing the Mizukage's eyes to widen. "I see you have my thanks," said the man, getting a nod from the blonde, who stepped back over to his grandfather. "Kakashi?" questioned Hiruzen, turning towards the silver-haired Junin, who was panting heavily though his hite had already been lowered. "That genjutsu was some nasty work. Makoto Sama could have broken it easily, but I don't have that level of expertise for genjutsu," said the man. I suppose we are ready then, said Hiruzen, getting a quick nod from Naruto before he burst into smoke, the clone dispersing. Good, now all of us have history, not all of it good. However, I've come into some information that I have decided to share with you all, which I'm hoping will go a long way to building a road for a peaceful future for our people, said the Hokage, surprising his guest with these words. And what information could achieve that incredible feat? Questioned the Tsuchikage. The peace we already enjoy is shaky at best and could shatter at any moment, said the Kage, as it could have at any other time within the last decade, said Mizukage. I take it this has something to do with the people you invited into this meeting, stated the Raikage gruffly. Indeed it does. I'd like to introduce you all to Masaki Yosho, first prince of the planet Jirai, along with Kamiki Seto, advisor to Jirai's current emperor, said Hiruzen, surprising everyone within the chamber with this introduction as the man, in his natural youthful appearance, stepped forward. You don't seriously expect us to believe they're from another planet, do you? Questioned the Earth Country daimyo with a frown. They look entirely too human, said the Fire daimyo in agreement. True enough. I'm half Jirian and half human. You'll find that there are many planets within the Empire that have humanoid inhabitants, not just your own, which is known as Furya. That makes you Furyan, not human, said Yosho. If that's true, why are you here? Questioned the Tsuchikage with narrowed eyes. Truthfully, because of my daughter. A couple of decades ago, one of my daughters went missing. She wanted to explore the universe, so she took her ship and set sail. We received a beacon from her ship a few months ago. Unfortunately, my daughter passed away during the Kyuubi's rampage on this village 12 years ago, explained Yosho. If that is the case, what is the purpose of this meeting? One would think you would want nothing to do with the planet after receiving such news, said the Wind daimyo. Our purpose here is simple, stated Seto as she surveyed the room and brought the room's attention to herself. During the course of her time on this planet and in Konoha in particular, Ichika performed and recorded a formal inspection of your race. You see, 1,000 years ago one of your race departed your planet as part of its first space exploration crew. She was rescued and taken in by a member of one of Jirai's noble families when her ship was attacked by pirates. At the time we decided not to make contact with the rest of your planet, as not only were they decreed as too underdeveloped as a people, but the planet was engulfed in war. Over the last few centuries, however, another Jirian has been living on this planet and monitoring your progress. While still terribly underdeveloped technologically, you have developed physically and spiritually to an unheard of extent, explained Seto. Yesterday's exam was used to prove the strength of your planet to us in order to verify the inspections done and determine what to be done about the recommendations made thereof, said Yosho. Did you know about this going into the exams, Hokage? Don't know? Questioned the Kage with a frown. I learned about this following the preliminaries that were held after the second exam, upon which point I sent out the letters to you all, said Hiruzen. At this the various Kages grimaced slightly. While Kumo and Iwa had only sent one team apiece, Suna had sent 3, one of which had made it all the way to the finals. However, Kiri, in the midst of their civil war, hadn't sent any teams to the exam at all. While we haven't seen the strength of the majority of your countries, we already have an assessment of your abilities. That said, this meeting is to determine what steps need to be taken to introduce you to the universe at large, explained Seto. What exactly would that mean for us? Questioned the Tsuchikage with a frown. Well, normally we would induct your planet formally into the Empire with whatever role you take depending upon your culture. In this instance it is unnecessary, as 150,000 years ago Riddick, at the time the last of the Furyan race, helped found the Empire. As such, your planet's role would in no way be a minor one, as the universe at large already knows of you. Your planet was deemed quarantined and closed off, mostly so that he could repopulate his race and further hone his abilities, explained the woman. While this meeting was taking, Naruto could be found along with Tsunade, Jiraiya and Shizune walking along the road leading away from the village. Thankfully, with his energy levels up, his healing factor had made quick work of his injuries. However, while the bones were healed, they were still a bit tender, so he was under orders to take it easy for a while. They'd been walking for about 30 minutes, which had been enough to put a bit of distance between them and the village, but not much of one. Hey Gaki, how are you holding up? Questioned Jiraiya, looking back towards the blonde. Well, my leg doesn't hurt anymore, so that's good, same with my arm. I think by tomorrow I should be good, said the blonde after a few moments. Incredible, I thought Tsunade Sama healed fast, but your own natural healing is phenomenal, said Shizune. I'd be done already, but Washu took the damn fox again, said Naruto with a frown. Oh, I thought you'd like being normal, said Jiraiya. Normal is overrated. I don't get sick, I recover from injury and exhaustion faster than anyone else. Sure, I may not be the best call when it calls for something like genjutsu, but as a trade off I have more power in one finger than most would ever achieve in their lives, said Naruto, holding up his index finger for emphasis. Well, considering what you can do with that finger, I think that's a given, said Jiraiya, causing the blonde to shrug. Speaking off, how the hell you learn the Rinnegan anyway? Questioned Tsunade. It's how I graduated. I broke into the old man's scroll room and swiped the scroll of seals. I was able to learn Kage Bunshin that night, but I had also gotten the info for the Rasengan and Rinnegan to work on later, said Naruto with a smirk. Right, we'll have to upgrade the security in that place, said Tsunade. Go ahead, maybe next time it will actually be a challenge, said Naruto. Next time? Questioned Tsunade. Well, yeah, how else am I supposed to work on being sneaky then going up against the Anbu? Besides, I just know the scroll for the Hiraishin is in there somewhere, said Naruto, a mischievous glint entering his eyes. You shouldn't worry about that for a while, Gaki. That will take years to even start learning, as it takes a level of Fuinjutsu knowledge that you just don't have right now, said Jiraiya, though there was a look of pride in his eyes. So anyone want to tell me where we're going? Questioned Naruto. No one told you? Questioned Shizune with a frown. All this guy said was that it was an A rank mission, which I'm not supposed to be on considering I'm not cleared for duty yet, said Naruto, frowning, pointing his thumb at Jiraiya. Calm down. There's no combat expectations for this one, Gaki. It's ranked so high due to its importance to the village, not risk of danger, said the Toad Sage, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow in curiosity. As you know, Tsunade is going to be the next Hokage. However, before the word can spread, the old man wants us to handle a little situation before it could become a problem, explained the man. Are you talking about Tsunade's gambling debts? Questioned Naruto, getting the adults to blink in shock. How do you know? Questioned Jiraiya. How could I not? The underground is a place for gambling, and I've been around a few halls myself. You don't go into those places and not hear about the legendary sucker, said Naruto with a shrug. I hate that damn nickname, said Tsunade with a scowl. I would too, especially if the rumor is it's not, snapped Tsunade, cutting the young man off before he could finish. Okay, so I'm guessing we'll hit Atofika Gai, then Crayer City, and finish off in Tanzaku Gai, stated Naruto. What makes you think that? Questioned Jiraiya. Gambling revenue is controlled by 3 families for the most part in Hai no Kuni. Those are the Kurosawa, Nishimura, and the Watanabe. Each one is based within a different section of the country. If you're serious about paying your debts, go directly to the bosses. We can finish in Tanzaku Gai, since the Nishimura is hosting that poker tournament at the end of the week, and you'll want to get those 2 out of the way since we have to go through those places first anyway, explained Naruto. Okay, how do you know all of that? Questioned Shizune. Like I said, I've stepped into a few halls, said Naruto. Back within the village, the leader's summit was still in progress when a series of quick knocks resounded on the door. Upon giving permission for the door to be opened, the group were met with the sight of a Chunin covered in sweat and panting heavily as he rushed into the room. Hokage. Sama, emergency, panted the Chunin. What's wrong? Demanded the elderly Kage. Asuma. San, Kurenai. San, and Gai. San under attack, Uchiha Itachi and Hoshikage Kisame. Anbu on me, exclaimed the man, causing a team of Anbu to appear in an instant. Before they could move, however, a streak blew by them as Kakashi blasted out of the room, his sheer speed surprising many. As he dashed out of the room, he was not surprised to be met by Yagura, the Mizukage, as the young man fell into step with him. Any shinobi of Junin rank should know about the 2 men who had apparently attacked his Junin. Uchiha Itachi, an S. Class nuke. Nin wanted for the annihilation of the entirety of the Uchiha clan, save one, his younger brother Sasuke. Then there was Hoshikage Kisame, the monster of the hidden mist, an S. Class nuke. Nin wanted for the murders of multiple daimyo within the elemental nations. As they made their appearance, they could see that Kakashi had already engaged into a rather fast-paced battle with Itachi, while Guy was similarly holding his own against Kisame. However, seeing Kakashi suddenly drop like a puppet with its strings cut, the elderly Kage decided enough was enough and ran through a quick chain of seals. Kaiten. Karyu Enden. Fire Release. Fire Dragon Flame Bullet. Sweden. Suigaden. Water Release. Water Fang Bullet. At the same time as if they had previously practiced it, the two Kages had used the technique, with a stream of fire being expelled from the mouth of the Hokage, only to quickly split into three, forming into dragons aimed directly at Itachi. Meanwhile, a trio of drills made completely of water had emerged from the surface of the lake that Kisame landed on after a harsh kick from Guy. As they descended on him, Kisame had no time to react before the drills slammed into him, only for him to fall apart, turning into water himself. Meanwhile, as the dragons descended on Itachi, the Uchiha burst apart into a flock of crows which quickly took flight just as the dragons slammed into each other. So they ran away, said the Sandaime, making a motion with his hand, and the Anbu vanished into blurs chasing after the rogues. Report, barked the Hokage as he stepped forward, the three able Chunin standing at attention as he did. Kurenai and I spotted a pair of suspicious-looking individuals while in the market district. When we trailed them here, they revealed themselves to be Uchiha Itachi and Hoshigaki Kisame, who stated they were after the Yondaime's legacy. When Kakashi arrived, he revealed that the two were members of a group called Akatsuki. At that point he just collapsed, stated Asuma. So they are already moving, mused the old man, frowning. Did Itachi's Sharingan change shape? Questioned the Sandaime. Hi, it was strange, it looked like three curves surrounding the pupil instead of Tomo's, stated Kurenai, having noticed that rather quickly. I see. Take Kakashi to the hospital, have them look for signs of mental stress and torture, stated the Hokage. Unknowing of what was going on in the village in his absence, Naruto could be found lying back on the bed of a hotel. Having reached Atofika Guy, Naruto had been given the opportunity for a bit of rest. While he hadn't said anything while traveling, he was uncomfortable with all the walking they'd done while he'd been on his bad leg. Shizune had looked it over and told him that the walking had probably slowed the healing, so they had confined him to bed rest for the day. At the moment he was currently reading a scroll that had been given to him by Jiraiya when they had first left the village. Naruto, first and foremost, I wish to congratulate you on both your battle during the exam and on managing to get Gamabunta's approval for being the Toad Clan's summoner. You put on quite the performance. That said, however, with all the people in attendance, I have no doubt that many eyes will be upon you in the future. I have heard from your teachers of your progress since you graduated and must say that I am impressed. Now, however, I feel that it is my turn to impactful on your training, and after much deliberation I have decided upon this, nature transformation. Nature transformation is a rather advanced form of chakra control which, once mastered, will allow you to change your chakra to any one of the 5 basic elements that ninjutsu typically focuses around. In order for you to learn this, I have included within this scroll the tools needed to test your elemental affinity and those needed to get you started in learning to master it. Now, as you may or may not know, each person is born with a natural affinity for one element or another, and sometimes entire clans can share an affinity, such as the Uchiha affinity for fire. However, just because you are born with one affinity does not mean that is the only one you can have, as with training you can develop several affinities. With your knowledge of Kage Bunshin, I would not be surprised if one day you had mastered the usage of all 5 basic natures. Sealed within this scroll is a single piece of paper known as chakra paper. This paper is rather special, created from specially grown and cared for trees. It has a peculiar reaction to chakra usage. Upon channeling chakra into it, one of 5 things will happen. It will burn, showing a fire affinity, it will get wet, showing water, get cut to show wind, begin to crumble to show earth, or it will crinkle to show lightning. Once you have determined your elemental affinity, you should return to this scroll for your training guide. Stopping his reading at this point, the blonde looked over the scroll before finding a single section marked with the kanji for paper. Unsealing it was actually quite simple, as all it required was a slight application of chakra to the kanji before the contents unsealed itself with a plume of smoke. Holding the small square sheet of paper in his hand, Naruto focused a small bit of chakra into the paper, which reacted immediately as the paper split in half thanks to a long cut through its center before both halves appeared to dampen themselves just a bit, showing that he had dual affinities for both wind and water. However, considering the paper's small reaction, he was guessing that the water affinity wasn't that strong yet. With that in mind, he went down to the section marked with the kanji for guides. After once more going through the unsealing procedure, he had 5 scrolls, each a different color and marked with a kanji for a different element. Grabbing the white scroll marked with the kanji for wind, he set that aside and sealed the others for later. Wind is the element of life and freedom, though unseen its presence is always felt represented by the air we breathe and the human spirit. Unpredictable, playful, soothing, destructive, inspiring and life-giving. The element of wind is all these things and much more. It is the representation of all that we cannot see, our souls, our spirits. Purity of the spirit in the heart, clarity of thought within the mind, focus of intent, unhindered sight, are all under the control of the clear soaring unfettered element of air. Yet the air is not always calm. Unpredictable and changing, the element of wind can easily be a roaring hurricane as it can be a playful breeze. Of all of the 5 elements, wind is both the rarest to naturally have and the most dangerous. Fuuten is an offensive element, the ultimate offensive element. It is performed by making chakra as sharp and thin as possible. Wind release is mainly short to mid. Ranged offensive techniques that combine brute force and keen precision to deal cutting and slashing damage. Because of this, it is not uncommon for weapon users to channel wind chakra along their blades to increase its cutting power. The scroll went on a bit more about what could be done with wind before finally giving the first step to harnessing wind chakra, which was being able to cut a leaf with just chakra. It was 20 minutes later, as he lied there glaring at the leaf that he held in his hand, that he found himself being interrupted by a series of soft knocks on the door. Placing the leaf down, he moved over towards it, slightly surprised that room service had made it up so quickly. Upon opening the door, however, the sight that greeted him wasn't the uniformed worker with a cart of food, but 2 men covered in black cloaks with red clouds decorated upon it. The taller of the 2 stood in the back, almost dwarfing the other due to his massive height, and he rather resembled a shark with his blue skin, sharpened teeth, and if he wasn't mistaken, those were gills under his eyes. Though dwarfed by the size of the other man, it was the smaller of the 2 that had Naruto's attention, with his long jet black hair, which framed his face and the set of fully mature Sharingan eyes. Itachi, spoke the teen, frowning. Uzumaki Naruto, you will come with us, spoke the shorter man, his voice a monotone. No, I don't think so. You can tell the rest of those idiots in that little cult of yours, Akatsuki was it, to quit while you're ahead, you'll all live longer that way, said Naruto. Sounds like a threat, maybe I should cut his legs off, said the taller man, a bloodthirsty grin on his shark-like face. It's no threat, it's a warning. One I am only giving because Itachi once gave me one of his own, so let's call it returning a favor, said Naruto, causing the Uchiha to narrow his eyes. You've been gone for a while, so let me tell you where things stand. Konoha is my bitch now, and all of my enemies are only moments away from having their fucking hearts ripped out. Jiraiya has taken me on as an apprentice, Kakashi is my Chunin. Sensei and I now have major allies in all of the major clans. I'm not like the others, people actually like having me around, you don't even understand the level of havoc that will come your way fucking with me. You think you're a wanted man now, the Hokage will unleash the hound's hell on your ass. The bounty that will be placed on your heads will make it impossible for you to sleep, hell you won't even be able to take a shit without something trying to kill you. You're good, I'll give you that, but even you get tired and everyone lets their guard down sooner or later. Take the offer and walk away from this, said the blonde, staring the elder man down without a flinch. You've always been brave, but to use my own words against me, said Itachi. They were good words, they got me where I am today. Besides, you saved me the trouble of killing off your clan myself. Now instead of a few dozen there are only 2 of you left for me kill, said the blonde. Make that 1. Cut in a new voice from behind the 2 nin. Itachi will be dying here today, came a deeper voice, causing Naruto to smirk at the 2 Sannin that now stood behind the rogue shinobi. Well played, Naruto. Kun, you stalled just long enough for help to arrive, stated Itachi, getting a smirk from the blonde. That's because everything I was saying is true, why lie when the truth gets much better results, said Naruto, not looking away. Kisame, we're leaving, it seems, Naruto. Kun and I will have to catch up another time, said Itachi before both men stepped away from the door and began walking away. As they did, Jiraiya and Tsunade moved to follow, only for Naruto to quickly shake his head in the negative. Undeterred, Jiraiya was quick to summon an armored toad about 6 feet crouched that began following after the 2. Once they were gone, Naruto wasted no time in heading back inside and almost immediately collapsed on the bed with Tsunade quick to follow after him. Well, that worked, said the teen after a few moments. How the hell do you know Uchiha Itachi? Said Jiraiya, closing the door. He's the one who convinced the boss to join the academy. Itachi caught him on the south side running numbers. Told him it was either a jail cell or the academy, you can guess what choice was made. Explained the blonde. We'll be talking about this in depth when we get back to the village. Where's the original? Questioned Tsunade. Left for the casino about 2 hours ago, by now he should be breaking the blackjack table. Said the clone. Alright, let's go get him and get out of here, the sooner this mission's over the better. Said Jiraiya, smacking the clone upside the head to dispel it before sealing away anything that wasn't there when they arrived. Honestly, we're gone less than an hour and 2s. Class Nin literally knock on the door. Said Tsunade, shaking her head as she left the room with Jiraiya behind her. At least we didn't have to fight. I'd hate to see the bill for destroying the hotel. Said Jiraiya. Let's just get this shit done before Orochimaru decides he wants another reunion or something. With that, the two entered the casino, finding Naruto easily, who was standing in front of the cashier's station surrounded by hotel security as three of them passed several cases through the window. Kamigaki, how much did you win? Questioned Jiraiya upon arriving. About 3 million, I think. Stated the blonde, causing both Sannin to blink in surprise. 3 million? Questioned Tsunade in disbelief. 3,500,000. Said the teller as another came out of the door moments later with a pair of briefcases in hand. Take it and go, kid, before someone tricks you into spending all of that money. Said the teller, handing over the cases. Once they were received, the trio wasted no time, after Jiraiya created a temporary storage seal on Naruto's arm in which the cases were placed. After that they wasted no time leaving the casino, and the entire town behind them and moving on to the next one. With the village illuminated by the early morning sun, Uzumaki Naruto was visible standing atop the Hokage monument, his figure concealed by his father's spiky hair. Things continued to move quickly even after the invasion had been over for 2 months. He had been in and out of the village non-stop since being cleared for active duty, which had taken almost a week. He had, for the most part, been involved in several C-ranked missions, a few that had been upgraded to B rank, and since his return after the spontaneous mission to settle Tsunade's gambling debts, he had even been involved in an A rank mission. Since he had been feeling that the less time spent in the village proper, the better, he was actually grateful for the constant missions at this point. It seemed that during their absence, there had been a leak of information about his lineage, specifically revealing that he was the joint heir of the Uzumaki and Senju clans. The civilian villagers had since arrived, sulking and offering platitudes. He had seen right through the nonsense and understood that the only thing they cared about was his ancestry. Fortunately, he was still keeping his relationship with his father a secret, but he was still irritated by the fact that it demonstrated their indifference to a person's character and only cared about their reputation. In actuality, he had just returned from a mission that had taken him to Cha no Kuni, where he had been able to retrieve the Raijin no Ken, his grandfather's chakra blade, and a priceless village relic through a sequence of events. The former Chunin Rokusho Aoi, who had deceived a member of his genin team into stealing the sword before going nuke Nin and joining AIM, was also apprehended by him. But the genin in question was actually Morino Ibiki's younger brother, who had been delighted to see Aoi wrapped up like a present when he arrived. He was permitted to keep the sword because it was a family heirloom, and he gave it to his grandmother right away. Sadly, things had not gone well because Aoi had managed to hit Sasuke with the sword, forcing him to be unconscious for a while before being brought home by medical professionals. There was a sigh of relief that came from knowing that the Uchiha would cause him trouble for some time to come. This was his second hospitalization in as many months. The last time was on a mission that took place in Yuki no Kuni last month, where they traveled to serve as the bodyguard for the well-known actress Fujikaze Yuki, who turned out to be Princess Kazuhana Koyuki, who had been missing for more than a decade. It seems that her father was deposed and murdered by his own younger brother, and Kakashi had taken Koyuki away. In the end, they did more than just act as her bodyguard while she was filming her new film. They actually overthrew her uncle, who had been attacking them non-stop during their stay. He had used a Rasengan to slam her uncle Dodo's chest, killing him himself. Sasuke had ended up in the hospital at that point due to a broken rib. Having said that, he knew that his continued injuries would make the usually grumpy Uchiha even more unpleasant to be around. Naruto-kun. A voice interrupted him mid-sentence. As he turned to face it, he was met by an Anbu agent with short brown hair and a rabbit mask on. Even though he couldn't see much of them, the tone of their voice indicated that they were women. Otherwise, he wouldn't have known because Anbu clothing effectively concealed the wearer's sex. You're being called to the Hokage's office. Right, thanks Usagi-san. The blonde said as she leapt off the mountain and toward the Hokage's office. Usagi sighed and shook her head as she watched him leave. Over the years, she had grown accustomed to Naruto's antics, but even she was unable to understand how he could just jump off the mountain, as he frequently did. However, given that numerous training activities were designed based on the chases the blonde had subjected them to, she wouldn't truly trade him for anything. In the meantime, Naruto had hurried to the Hokage's office, where he was greeted by Shikamaru, Asuma, and Kakashi. The old man was sitting behind his desk, smoking a pipe, when the secretary eventually led them in to see the Hokage. They could also see that Jiraiya and Tsunade were both present. Tsunade was sitting on a couch, sipping a cup of tea, and Jiraiya was sitting on the window sill, clearly staring outside. Thank you all for joining us so quickly. The Sandame blew out a stream of smoke and put his pipe away, saying this. No problem Gigi, just tell me I can stay for a while. The blonde said this while moving to the desk. Oh, I thought you had training to do. Jiraiya said. The elderly woman is insane. The Raijin clipped my limb. I'm receiving evasion training from her. Naruto gave an explanation, causing the Sannin to flinch and idly rub his shoulder. Well, you could stick around for a couple of hours if you want, help out in Academy's administration office. The elderly man nodded in agreement with his stand. In grandson. Now then for the reason you guys are here. The man said this while taking out 2 scrolls and setting them on top of his desk. The office is running a little behind schedule because of the invasion and the influx of missions, but I finally had some time to review the Chunin exam results. Many judges have come to the conclusion that the 2 of you meet the requirements for promotion. Therefore, it gives me great pleasure to congratulate and extend a warm welcome to the 2 of you as new Chunin members. The 2 teenagers instinctively caught the scroll that the elderly man threw to them. These promotions now come with a few extra duties in addition to a few bonuses. The specifics of your new duties, as well as some of the new items and locations you can visit, are contained in those scrolls. Having said that, Kakashi and Asuma will accompany you to get fitted for your new flak jackets. The first 3 will be given to you on the village's behalf. The remaining 2, however, will be paid for out of your own pockets. Once more, congrats to you both. Once everything was clear in his mind, Naruto gave the elderly man a bright smile that he hadn't seen in a long time. TCH, troublesome. Shikamaru said, glancing at the scroll he had been given. From his office in the center of Tsuchi no Kuni, Onoki asked, Are you prepared? Hi, I still don't know why you want me to go. A girl standing on the other side of his desk, who appeared to be around 15, said. Because I can at least have enough faith in you to not do something foolish. In addition, you are going because Roshi has promised to teach you Yodan. The young woman's eyes stopped widening at these words. Even though Roshi was a Jinchuriki, he was somewhat of a legend in Iwa. Indeed, there was a rumor that the sole reasons he wasn't Tsuchikage were that he was a Jinchuriki and that the current Sandame was the Nidame's highly esteemed pupil. Whatever the circumstances, it was a fact that many people had fantasized about receiving training from the man. This young lady was not overjoyed to hear the news, in contrast to others who would have been. Having grown up in close proximity to the Tsuchikage, she had developed a natural suspicion of him whenever he offered her something that she deemed too good. The elder snorted as the girl asked, What's the catch? Her pink eyes narrowing with suspicion. There's no catch. Think of it as a reward for getting that promotion. Now leave this place. The elderly man said, turning to face the pile of documents arranged on his desk. While this was going on, Sabaku no Gaara could be seen gazing off into the far off sand in the deep deserts that concealed Sanagakure. Ever since his return to his birth village, it had been difficult for him and the village community as a whole. After the tournament and the ensuing invasion, he and his siblings had returned to the village about a week and a half earlier, when they discovered the death of their father, the Yondaime Kazekage. The man had been absent from the village for several days, and it seems that a group of Chunin had found his body. But they had discovered that Otto Shinobi had ambushed him and his bodyguards, if only because one of the Chunin had been able to locate some of their attackers' bodies by using his family's summoning contract. Unlike his siblings, of course, he had not been particularly disturbed by the news. He had been concentrating on his recuperation and newly discovered skills rather than worrying about the deceased man. He had been spirited off to Washu's lab, where he had the most peculiar experience of having Shukaku removed, while everyone else had been preoccupied with the fallout from the invasion. Naturally, one would assume that this would have killed him, but the explanation given to him was that even after the Biju was taken out, they were still connected, so it wasn't truly free. After the Biju had stabilized completely, Washu inserted the core back into the seal, which took about a day. Thanks to Jiraiya, who had referred to his own as the worst piece of garbage he had ever seen, the seal itself had also been improved. He hadn't been able to completely redesign the seal, but he had been able to take significant steps to secure it more completely. According to what was previously explained to him, it resembled a room with big holes punched all over it. Jiraiya's work had essentially consisted of covering the holes and reinforcing the walls, much like putting bars on a window. As a result, he was able to completely control the sand, stop the Biju's voice from continuously whispering in his ear, and even go to sleep. He had discovered during his training that his sand now responded more quickly than before and required less chakra and focus to use. In addition, his body had undergone some changes. Due to the quantity of sleep he was receiving, he noticed that his strength and speed were gradually increasing daily. The most intriguing aspect was the significant improvement in his senses, especially in terms of touch, hearing, and sight. He could now see, for example, twice as far as he could previously and even as well at night. He had developed an even greater appreciation for silence as a result of his increased hearing, even though he had quickly figured out how to block out most of what he heard. At last, his tactile perception had grown to the extent that he could identify variations in the sand beneath his feet. Luckily, this increase only had an impact on his hands and feet. Otherwise, things might have gotten strange because they were both now very sensitive. Washu claimed that since Shukaku's energy was stable and flowing correctly, his senses had grown to resemble those of a tanuki. All of that was fine and good, but it wasn't what he was thinking about right now. Rather, he had dedicated some time to revisiting the discussions he and Naruto had had during his stay in Konoha following their fight. He had long since come to the conclusion that his previous approach to the situation was flawed, so he is currently trying to think of a fresh justification for fighting. Though he could tell his new attitude was surprising to many, he had at least stopped killing villagers, even though he still didn't have a new explanation. However, it had made many more nervous, wondering when someone would do something to make him snap again. Temari's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Gaara, are you ready?" Well, he figured he had one reason to fight. It was 15 minutes past noon by the time Naruto had completed all he had to do. The sun had already risen to its highest point in the sky. Shinobi he passed and the occasional civilian nodded respectfully as he made his way through the streets. When he eventually arrived at the hospital, Sakura was sitting by Sasuke's bedside, staring out the window, and he had done so without saying anything to the staff as he ascended to the third floor. "Well, I figured I'd find you here, Sakura." Upon hearing him speak, the two people in the room turned to face him, but their eyes widened upon seeing his Chunin vest. As soon as Sasuke's fists clenched into his seat, Sakura leapt to her feet and embraced the blonde, congratulating him on his promotion. Naruto looked up at Sasuke as he uttered the words, "Fight me." Naruto felt something stir inside of him as the idea of facing Sasuke in battle flashed before their eyes met for a brief moment. But after a brief while, he managed to repress that aspect of himself. The blonde answered, "No." The Uchiha fluidly stood up from the bed and growled, "What?" "Don't get me wrong, I would really like to. Not only do I not have time today, but you haven't been let out of this place yet. But if we do battle, I want to beat you without any justification," Naruto said, making the Uchiha prickle. "Don't think for even a second that just because you've got that vest you're suddenly on my level, Dobi." The Uchiha spoke as he moved forward. "Sasuke, before I got this vest, we were on the same page. I actually have a higher level of physicality than you do. We both know that you will never be able to match my strength or endurance. Having said that, I'll concede that your genjutsu is superior. In terms of ninjutsu, I believe we're about equal at this point, which would bring things to taijutsu. You have a greater understanding of your style than I do, but once again, I am physically stronger than you. You also probably have a slight advantage in speed, and our reach is about equal. The only true way to find out who is better is to simply fight it out and see. Having said that, finding out will be easy once you're cleared." After saying so, the blonde turned and walked out of the room, giving Sasuke a quick look before hastily following him. When left on his own, the Uchiha could only clench his fists and grind his teeth at not getting what he had demanded. As they made their way through the hallways outside the room, Sakura wondered what would happen next but was relieved that Naruto had maintained his composure and avoided a fight with Sasuke. Nearly 20 minutes later and the duo had entered the main house of the Senju estate to find the place full to bursting as lunch was brought out. Sakura wasted little time heading over to the kitchen to join Sasami, Hinata, Noik, Kiriko, Karen and Hanabi, the earlier confrontation being pushed to the back of her mind. Karen, the kunoichi from Kusa whom he had rescued during the second exam, as it turns out was his cousin, a pure-blooded Uzumaki. Her inclusion into the group had thus come pretty quickly and surprisingly with a large amount of information, and not just from Kusa, from what he'd learned. Naruto meanwhile had made his way over the Tenchi and Seina, whose presence he could be found in more often than not. He could see Yosho in conversation with Hiruzen and for a moment wondered what they were talking about before deciding it didn't matter. Tsunade was of course also in attendance and was in quiet conversation with Tenyo, Irie and Seto, and that actually worried him somewhat. Still, he was happy for the Senju princess, as he knew she was no longer maintaining her genjutsu, as Seto had provided her with some of Jiraiya's life water, which had reversed the effects of both her aging and of her healing seal. As such, she now naturally had the appearance of a woman in her mid-20s, the same which could be said for Jiraiya. Of course he knew that the life water of Jiraiya was a closely guarded secret and treasure like the trees of Jiraiya. However, considering that Tobirama had actually married his grandmother, it had made the two clans allies, which allowed the sharing of the water with Tsunade. He had also learned that Seto was something of a matchmaker, having set Seina up with all of his wives, and was wondering what the woman had in store for Tsunade. He could see Aika and Ryoko in conversation with Amane and Ryoko Balta. Joining the four of them in conversation was a newer duo joining the group, that being Hana and Anko. In truth, he had known Anko for a few years now, and it had been that relationship that had allowed the inclusion of Hana. Thing was, he still wasn't sure about adding Hana to his family. Don't get him wrong, he liked her as a person and he would be lying if he said she wasn't a looker. However, the fact remains she was a complication. She was an Inuzuka, and if there was one thing he knew about that clan, it was that they valued loyalty above all. Unlike him, she had an entire clan that came with her addition. Sure, you could say Hinata was the same in that regard, but the truth was Hinata didn't really have any loyalty to her clan at this point after everything they'd put her through over the years. In fact, her only real connection to the clan as a whole was her sister Hanabi. Even her father could simply be written off. That couldn't be said for Hana though, and as such her inclusion would create a connection, a tether that would hold them to the village. He knew his own connection to the village was actually incredibly weak. In truth, it was really only the old man and the Ichirakus. However, Ayame was already heading towards the Galaxy Academy to join the culinary studies program, and he knew once she was ensnared it would be an easy task to convince Tucci to walk away. Problem was, the old man was still Hokage, and he knew the man would never willingly leave the village, not forever. However, he had long since come to the realization that the old man would probably die in battle, and as such was already prepared for such an occasion. Tsunade accepting the Hokage's hat was truthfully unexpected, but he really didn't have any connection with the Senju head at this point, as he'd only met her after the invasion. Even with that, however, the closer they got to their departure, the more he second-guessed leaving. The fact of the matter was that, as fucked up as his life had been, he now found himself not wanting to leave, as it felt too much like running away to him. There was also the fact that things weren't as bad as they were when he was growing up. Standing to his feet after a few minutes, the blonde made his way out into the back of the house and out of the door. Once out, he walked for only a few minutes before taking a seat on the ground and resting his back against the base of a tree. Once he was settled, he let out two sharp whistles that echoed out through the small forest that was his backyard. For a few minutes all was silent before several forms emerged from the darkness of the bushes and converged on the blonde, revealing themselves to be 6 hellhounds. Washu's project had finished itself just a few days after the invasion, and as such he now had 3 male hellhounds to match his girls. The boys he'd given the names Kohaku, Hayate and Masaru, different from the girls only due to their different body mass. Whereas the girls slimmed down at the midsection to the back end, the males held a slightly thicker back end and the scales were more pronounced on their back ends to match the front, unlike the females on whom the scales were not as prominent. "I figured I'd find you out here," called a new voice nearly 10 minutes later. Turning to the voice that had broken him from his thoughts, Naruto was not surprised to see Washu standing a few feet away. His hounds were still surrounding him, though all occupied, as he brought each of them a large steak to eat. Standing to his feet at her beckoning, the blonde stretched himself out before patting each hound on the head and following after Washu. Nearly 3 minutes later, he found himself within her lap along with 7 other people that he'd gotten to know pretty well over the past few months. One of them was Fu the green-haired, being someone he'd gotten to know pretty well over the last stretch of time. Also joining them was a woman who stood at 5 feet 5 with long straight blonde hair bound with taut bandages and dark eyes. She wore a white flak jacket fastened by only one strap over the left shoulder, which is fastened with a button. The jacket had no scroll pouches, instead consists of one diagonal line going down to the left with 4 small lines on top and one medium-sized line going down to the right that is perpendicular to the previous line. She also wore a pair of white Shinin arm guards to go with her black pants and the Kumo Hite. Tae she wore on her forehead. This was Yugito ni, a Chunin of Kumo and the Jinchuriki of the Nibi no Nekomata. Also there was Yagura the Sanbi no Jinchuriki, who he recognized from the Cage Summit a few weeks previous. Unlike the last time he saw him, he now wore a gray sleeveless shirt with the Kirigakure Hite. Tae attached to the front, short sleeved mesh armor over which he also wears a green poncho along with a turquoise sash around his waist paired with a green apron over his pants. Another was man with red hair, mustache and beard which tapered off to a point. He wore a long sleeved light red shirt and pants with mesh armor shirt and fitted black suit underneath, along with calf length sandals. His name is Roshi, a retired Chunin from Iwa and the Jinchuriki of the Yonbi. Next was Han the Jinchuriki of the Gobi, also from Iwa, and was a very tall man standing over 7 feet in height, making him easily the tallest of them. He was currently wearing only a pair of black pants and a matching shirt, though he knew the man had a full set of red armor which he called steam armor. Next was a man by the name of Udakata from Kiri, who stood at 5 feet 8 and was a pretty thin guy with pale golden eyes and brown hair that reaches to his shoulders. He wore a long, light blue kimono adorned with a small emblem of 3 bubbles on the back, and a pair of gray pants underneath, with an orange sash. The kimono hung loose, exposing his chest. In it, he carried a bamboo jug filled with a soap solution and a pipe. Unlike the rest of them, he was a nuke. Nin, however, his reason behind his defection had been enough to get both Yagura and chosen successor to revoke that status, and instead had granted him travel rights provided he performed a set number of missions a year for the village. Finally came another Kumo. Nin, this one male that went by the name of Karabi, the guardian of Kumo. B, as they'd taken to calling him, had dark skin and a muscular build, as well as braided white hair and a goatee. On his right shoulder he had a tattoo with the kanji for iron, and on his left cheek, he has a tattoo of a bull's horn. He wore oval-shaped sunglasses and a white colored hite. Tae. He also has his village's standard flak jacket and a long, red rope belt tied around his waist, the standard Kumo hand and shin guards, shinobi sandals, and a white scarf around his neck. As he entered, he received several approving nods upon the group spotting his new flak jacket before he joined the group that were all sitting within the room where Washu indicated. As he took his seat, he realized he sat in the exact center of the group. Washu meanwhile had moved and took her own seat before turning it so that it faced them. Alright then, to start off I should let you all know that I have completed the stabilization of all of the Biju. Started the woman, causing each of them to perk up at this news. That said, I would also like to inform you that you all will be the last Jinchuriki that will exist. Afterwards, the creation of a Jinchuriki will be considered a capital offense. After all, no one wants them to explode and destroy the planet. Each of you should also notice that the power of your respective Biju has increased and their personalities have mellowed out quite a bit. As you can all see, Gaara isn't here as he's been recalled to his village a few days ago, but he'll rejoin us when it's time to head out. In the meantime, I would like all of you to take this time to reacquaint yourselves with your partners. As she said this, she hit a button on her keyboard, causing a light to flicker into life to the left, which revealed a large mechanical station with 8 energy balls perched within glass cylinders. As one, the group made their way over to the station, easily finding the correct one for them thanks to the kanji markings on each section of the station. You should also know that once you place them where your seal was, they will be absorbed into your bodies and the seals will reassert themselves to the same power as before. With that said, she hit another button and each of the cylinders opened, allowing them to reach inside and retrieve the power cores. Naruto was the first to reach inside, with no hesitation grasping the core in his hand and withdrawing it, and as before he held it only for a few moments before it was absorbed into his system, causing him to grit his teeth against the burn and slight pain that accompanied it. Seeing this, each of the others grasped and removed their own orb, only unlike Naruto were not prepared for just what would happen, which caused them each to cry out due to the increased power they felt surging through their bodies. Elsewhere at the same time, Uchiha Sasuke was scowling as sat with his back to a tree within a small park within the Uchiha district, having been released from the hospital earlier in the day. Despite this, he could help but replay his teammates' words in his mind almost as if they were set on a loop. Throughout their time in the academy, he had always been far ahead of everyone else, especially Naruto, in all categories. Yet somehow the blonde had managed to improve himself so much within the span of a year, whereas he felt he himself had barely improved within that time. Not only that, but the blonde had returned from each of their last few missions without any major injuries, while he himself had been forced into the hospital twice. That's not even mentioning the thing that really pissed him off. That being that a few months ago the clan slayer Uchiha Itachi had come out of hiding and put Kakashi into the hospital. He'd only learned about what happened due to some Chunin that had barged into the room and blurted it out for clarification while he had been visiting. To make matters worse, it hadn't been him the kin slayer had been after. No, instead he had been after his teammate, and the only reason he'd been able to chase after him had been due to the other Chunin who had restrained him when he tried. Even still, he couldn't let such a thing slide and had been pushing himself harder in his training ever since. Yet even with that, he still felt like he was standing still, as his own recent hospital stays had highlighted. Up until now, just what have I been doing? Thought the Uchiha, gritting his teeth while his eyes glared out at the forest. Now those are nice eyes, called a voice, catching his attention. Looking up at the sound, he found himself looking up at 4 people, 3 boys and a girl, before he found himself bound to the tree with steel wire. Now then, let's begin, spoke the apparent leader. The next morning found Naruto waking not due to the alarm but by a rapid pounding on his door. Stumbling out of bed, he quickly threw on a set of sweatpants and, not even bothering with a shirt, made his way to the door. Upon arriving, he found himself greeted by the sight of Kotetsu standing outside his door. The sight of the man who had never stopped by his house woke him quickly. "What's going on?" questioned the teen. "Get dressed, you've been summoned to the Hokage's office," stated the Chunin before leaping away. Frowning, the blonde closed the door and quickly went about getting dressed, taking a 5-minute shower to help him fully awaken before dressing in his usual gear, throwing on his Chunin vest instead of his usual one as he headed out the door. Thanks to his apartment being so close to the Hokage's office, he made it there within 5 minutes to be greeted by the sight of Tsunade sitting behind the desk while the old man stood watching him by the window. Having come across this sight a few times in the past, he knew that the old man had placed her in charge of the situation and as such promptly stood before her at attention. "Now that you're here, I'll cut right to it. 20 minutes ago, Sakura was found unconscious near the shopping district. From what she was able to tell us, when she was revived, she came across Uchiha Sasuke apparently in the process of leaving the village. From what she has said, he believes he has no choice and proceeded to knock her out," stated the woman, getting his eyes to widen before they narrowed. Following this was a briefing which took a bit longer than expected, mostly because he wanted to straighten out details and she wanted to explain a few things to him as well. Once that was done, he was informed with what he had to work with, which was genin, as the vast majority of the Chunin and Chunin were still out on missions assigned to them. However, he quickly shoved aside his annoyance with this and instead wasted no time leaving the room, leaping out the window and creating several clones as he went. 15 minutes found him standing at the main gates as several people touched down around him. Looking around, he could spot Neji, Tenten, Choji, Shikamaru, and Kiba all spread out around him. He had wanted Shino but remembered he had left with his father on a mission and wasn't due back for another day. He'd also tried for Lee, only to learn that the bowl-cut sporting genin had already started his training day and he had no idea where to look for him. "Alright, listen up," called the blonde, catching the attention of not just the genin but the Chunin guarding the gate. Early this morning, Uchiha Sasuke left the village. From what Tsunade Sama has said, he may or may not have done so under duress. Unfortunately, he wasn't forthcoming with the details when he knocked out Sakura this morning. However, we have reason to suspect that he is being accompanied by Otto. Nin. Whatever the case, our mission is to catch him and retrieve him, his condition for doing so depending on the situation," stated the blonde, getting serious looks to come over the group. "Intelligence has discovered that there is a base for the Otto Nin hidden in Ta no Kuni. We cannot let them cross over into Ta no Kuni. Not only will our chances of losing them increase, but it would put us in enemy territory. That said, speed is going to be our greatest asset here. Depending on Sasuke's level of cooperation, then they may be traveling slower than anticipated," stated the blonde. "And what if he's actually going voluntarily?" questioned Shikamaru with a serious frown. "Then we deal with him like any other nuke. Nin, in which case I'll kill him myself," said Naruto. "The council won't take well to that," said Neji. "Fuck the council. They're not the ones risking their lives for this, we are. If it's a choice between future Sharingan bearers and my current friends, then damn the Sharingan," said the blonde. "That said, as I'm the one this mission was assigned to, I'm in overall command. However, as Shikamaru is also a Chunin and was simply farther away than I was, well split command of this one. That said, if he gives an order you follow it, got me," said the blonde, glaring at all of them before nodding to Shikamaru, who stepped forward. "Right then, once again, this is a rescue mission and we happen to be the pursuers. Which means it's easier for the enemy to get first strike on us. That said, we'll use the squad formation most suitable to a sudden strike. If anyone moves on their own or ignores orders, it might kill us all," said the Nara Heir, giving Kiba a pointed stare for a longer moment than others. "We'll travel in a single file formation with Kiba up front. Not only does he travel all over the country year-round, but his sense of smell will be a definite help in not only tracking Sasuke but in detecting traps due to the enemy sense. I'll follow behind Kiba, enabling me to give orders depending on the situation. Tenten and Naruto will be 3rd and 4th positions respectively, allowing Tenten to cover both ends, as can Naruto with his quicker reactions and his clones. Next is Choji. While he may not have the speed, he's got enough hit power to compensate. Between myself, Tenten and Naruto, I'm sure we can create enough openings for you to put them down. Neji's got the most difficult position in the rear. We'll be relying on your Byakugan to not only cover us so nothing sneaks up on us, but to check ahead of us for blind spots," explained Shikamaru, getting understanding nods all the way around. Seeing that everyone understood their positions and roles going forward, Naruto gave the word and they all vanished, becoming mere blurs, darting out of the gates and into the forest towards Ta no Kuni. Meanwhile, in a completely different sector of space, Masaki Azusa could be found sitting within the control seat of his ship. While it was currently docked and used nowhere near as much as he desired to, he usually found himself just entering the ship just to take some time to sit and relax. It also, unknown to many, allowed him to be close to his first love, Mitsuki, whom he met when he was a young boy. Though she had died before he had even so much as shared a kiss with her, he knew that he was in her heart, as his ship Kirito had been her own and one of 5 that had been supporting her life force. When she had cut herself off from that life force during his tree bonding ceremony, he had taken her body and placed her within a sap-filled crystal pond within the tree powering the ship, a pond which was still to this day preserving her body. At the moment, he was simply taking some time to relax and unwind from the day he'd had thus far. Between the constant meetings he'd been forced to sit through lately, he had desperately needed some time to simply clear his mind. Despite the joy that had come with discovering the existence of his great-grandson, he couldn't help but feel it was with horrible timing. While the empire as a whole was currently in a state of peace, only a select few currently knew that the peace was sitting on a razor's edge. For the last 2 years or so, he had been trying to prepare for what he felt would be an eventual confrontation by getting rid of what could have been a major strategic weakness in the pirates and smugglers. With the troubles he feared would be coming, he had felt they had needed to be taken completely off the board before the enemy could attempt to even try making use of their knowledge of how to best navigate space. While he had been doing that, however, according to the reports he'd been reading, the situation in which he was worried about had worsened. Already in the next galaxy over bordering on the eastern edge of their space, the Kree Empire had already fallen, and while considering the Kree did not have full control over their universe as he did over his own, they had still controlled a fairly large portion of it, nearly 75%. Their ways of achieving this, however, had plunged their universe into a bloody civil war which had only made it easier for outside forces to come in and sweep the board with the lot of them. While some had managed to escape the destruction, the universe had been essentially wiped out. Following the emergence of this new threat was the current conflict with them and the Sheer, the rulers of a southern empire. Unfortunately, the Sheer, for all their brilliance, were not natural warriors, and while he had sent out forces to help bolster their own and aid them, it was turning out to be a losing conflict. With it looking more and more like war would descend upon his space, Azusa found himself every once in a while needing time simply to reflect. Alas, even that was in rare supply these days, as he was reminded as the chime of the ship's alarm went off, forcing him to prepare for his next meeting. Meanwhile, back on Furia, a frowning Naruto found standing with his arms crossed atop the head of a statue created in the likeness of Senju Hashirama. The statue was actually part of a set, the other one resting across from where he stood bearing the likeness of Uchiha Madara. The two statues stood facing each other, separated by a waterfall. His eyes, however, were focused not on the statue but down below at the base of the waterfall, where the form of Uchiha Sasuke could be found crouching atop the water. To say he hadn't been having a good day would be quite the understatement as far as he was concerned. After leaving the village, he and his squad had managed to catch up to the retreating squad of Otto Nin in only a matter of hours. Unfortunately, his team had been systematically broken apart and drawn into their separate battles. The first to break off had been Choji, who had stayed behind to combat Hirobu, a member of the team that had made off with Sasuke. The next to break off had been Neji, who had stayed behind to face off with an Auto Nin with 6 arms named Kidamaru. The next split up had seen Kiba and Tenten falling over a collapsing cliff edge into the river below with another member of the group, Saken. He was glad Tenten was with Kiba, as according to the intelligence the village had been able to gather, Saken had a unique Keki Genkai which allowed him to manipulate his body at the molecular level and even merge his body with others. According to the intelligence, he was already sharing his own body with that of his twin brother Yukon, so Tenten being with Kiba would even things numerically at least. Shikamaru had ended up with the sole kunoichi of the group, the pink-haired Tayuya. From what intelligence had gathered, she favored Genjutsu, which would make Shikamaru the perfect person to face her with his genius-level intellect. He himself had ended up after the wildcard of the bunch, Kimimaro, the last of the Kagaya clan. According to the intelligence, Kimimaro had at one point been the leader of the ground, however had recently contracted some type of disease that was proving to be deadly. Following this, he had been pulled from active duty and confined to the medics, which meant Orochimaru was desperate if he was sending him out. Kimimaro had lived up to the hype, however, and had proven himself a worthy foe. Thankfully, before he could spend too much time trying to fight him, Lee had finally made his appearance, allowing him to go after Sasuke, who had run off ahead, which led them to their current positions. Stepping off of the head of the statue, Naruto allowed gravity to take hold, landing lightly on his feet on top of the water. In the next instant, he was in motion, tilting himself backwards slightly to avoid a right hook from Sasuke before his own arm came up, pushing the Uchiha's elbow in order to add to the momentum of his swing before slipping off to his left, allowing himself access to the Uchiha's back. Sasuke, however, had used the momentum to turn his missed attack into a low sweeping kick, which Naruto dodged by slipping backwards. As the Uchiha completed his turn, a large fireball burst from his mouth, which the blonde dodged by stopping the flow of chakra to his feet, allowing himself to fall into the water. Narrowing his eyes upon not seeing his opponent, Sasuke warily began to take in his surroundings. However, before he could get far, the blonde erupted from the water like a missile, slamming an uppercut into his chin and launching him up and away. Recovering quickly, Sasuke flipped himself backwards while still in the air so that he managed to land on his feet once he hit the water. As he moved to return the favor, his eyes widened as he looked up just in time to be met with a fist to the face. As the first shot landed, Naruto let loose, sending out a barrage of punches in a rapid-fire manner, with each blow causing the Uchiha's body to rock before landing an uppercut to his chin that launched the Uchiha into the air. Recovering quickly, Sasuke flipped himself so that he was able to land on his feet, skidding across the water before managing to bring himself to a stop. As he looked back up towards Naruto, his eyes could be seen as the well-known scarlet red of the Sharingan. However, it was only as he looked up that he realized that the entire area was beginning to be covered in a dense mist that would cover everything from the water to near the top of the statues within the valley they were fighting in. Hitaki Kakashi was exhausted. He had been on the return trip from his own mission when the summoned toad had appeared before him and delivered its message. As such, he had quickly changed direction. Instead of heading into the village, which was just on the horizon, he created a clone to do so in his place and summoning his personal Kin pack before racing after his wayward students. As he ran, he could see the signs of battle clear as day in various locations, that pack leading him fairly quickly. For each battle he passed, he'd send a member of the pack of summons to double back for the medics he'd requested and lead them to the battlegrounds. It was as he came to the Valley of the End, however, that he stopped his single visible eye, taking in the destruction that littered the place. The two statues had suffered major damage, with gouges ripped along their surfaces, and Madara's head had been completely destroyed, while parts of the valley walls had either gouges or craters embedded in them. Looking down, he could see multiple gouges and craters littering the bottom portion of the walls, and after leaping down was able to find the form of his blonde student sitting slumped at the destroyed feet of the Shodai Hokage. "You're late," came Naruto's voice as a single eye cracked open. "What happened here?" questioned Kakashi. Sasuke needed to be put in his place. "Unfortunately, by the time that was done, I was too spent to deal with Kabuto. I tried to stop him but wasn't able to steady my shot, took out Madara's head instead," explained the blonde. "Can you stand?" questioned the scarecrow. "Tried, the bastard did something to my leg." "Did you find the others?" answered and questioned the blonde. "Yeah, there's a team of medics on the way. They should be here in about 15 minutes, just try and get some rest until then," said Kakashi. "Yeah, that second level cursed seal is a bitch. said the blonde before his eye closed once more. When he next awoke, he did so in the hospital and was told nearly 3 days had passed since he'd been found. Apparently both Choji and Neji had been forced to go through some major surgeries due to their own battles. Tenten had a broken ankle and Kiba had to be treated for a stab wound in his side. Lee, however, had needed to tended to due to a puncture in his right leg. Apparently it had been stabbed clean through the calf. Shikamaru had gotten off the lightest out of the group with only a broken right index finger. Tenten, Kiba, Lee and Shikamaru had all been saved further injury thanks to the arrival of Kankuro, Gaara and Tamari into their respective fights. From what he'd been told, Tamari had literally buried her opponent under a corpse of trees for pissing her off, while Kankuro had made quick work of his. Gaara had apparently struggled with Kimimaro until the teen had suddenly keeled over. Tsunade had told him all of this while she had been visiting him after his own surgery. Apparently his own injuries had been the worst of the bunch. Not only had he broken his left wrist, but he'd had major surgeries to recover from the damage of a punctured lung, and his left shoulder had to be almost completely repaired. Those last 2 injuries alone had led to the woman going on a nearly 15-minute rant about Kakashi teaching the Uchiha the Chidori and the stupidity of it. Apparently he'd also had to have his MCL and ACL surgically repaired in his right leg, which explained why he'd been unable to stand up in the valley, as well as surgery on his improperly healed broken neck. All in all, the only reason he was even still alive with all the damage he'd taken was due to the fox's chakra that had still been coursing through his body. While he'd given as good as he'd gotten, the fact that he was so badly hurt wasn't taken well at all. When he'd reported the existence of a second-level cursed seal and what it did to Sasuke, she'd calmed a bit, at least to where she was no longer raving about him for being reckless. Of course she was nothing compared to what he'd had to endure from his grandmothers, though Miyako was more understanding than Irie. As it was, he was already dreading his future, as Miyako had already promised him intensified training for the next few years. Sakura, however, had apparently come to see him while he was out, taken one look at him and gone to Tsunade, requesting the woman to take her as an apprentice. Considering their familial connection, it hadn't taken much at all for the woman to agree. Hinata had apparently had a similar reaction and had gone to her father demanding his attention and personal training. However, before he could relent, Miyako had instead volunteered to train her herself. Apparently the elder had knowledge of another taijutsu style the Hyuga had once used when the clan had been led by the matriarchs. This news had apparently not been well received by the clan elders. However, Hiyashi had approved of the proposition on the condition the woman trained both his daughters in this lost style, which Miyako had agreed to. In that time he hadn't been visited by Hana as well, along with every other member of his extended family. Thankfully he wouldn't be confined to the hospital bed for much longer, as the Uzumaki healing factor was no joke, especially when amplified by the potency of the fox's yang chakra. His thoughts were cut off, however, as the room literally shook just before Jiraiya made his way in. "Damn Gaki, you look like shit," said Jiraiya as he came in and took a seat beside the bed. "Your powers of observation are astounding, Arrow," Senin stated the blonde in a deadpan tone. "Listen kid, how would you like to be my official apprentice? I'm talking personal training for the next 3 years. Questioned the Sannin, surprising the blonde. You were able to delay the Uchiha long enough to force Orochimaru into switching into a different body than the Uchihas. This means we have 3 years before we have to worry about old Snake Face trying to take over his body. Furthermore, I've also discovered that Akatsuki won't be making any moves against you for the next few years, which gives us time to train you up," explained the Sannin. "Sakura's been taken on by Tsunade and Sasuke will no doubt have Orochimaru training him," said the blonde, catching the Sannin's attention. "If we do this, I want to do it 100%. Fuinjutsu, ninjutsu, everything. I'm already a Chunin, I don't want to come back and have to play catch-up," said the blonde, causing Jiraiya's face to immediately turn even more serious instead of semi-light like his expression had been before. "I told you if you asked him you couldn't half do it," came the voice of the Sandame as he made his way inside. "Gigi," greeted the blonde, cracking a smile as the elder came and laid a hand on his head. "How are you feeling?" questioned the old man. "I'm getting better. Washu came and gave me the fox back earlier today. I can already feel myself healing faster. The fox says I'll be good as new in a few days," explained the blonde. "That's good. The ambassadors for the other villages have begun arriving. As soon as Tsunade says you can move, you'll be boarding the ship to Jirai," explained the elder. "So who are the ambassadors?" questioned Naruto. Well, first there is Fu from Taki along with Shibuki, the son of Taki's leader. Kuretsuchi from Iwa will be accompanying Roshi and Han, the containers of the Yanbi and Gobi. Of course your friend Gaara along with his siblings representing Suna. As for Kiri, they're sending Yagura, the Yondaime Mizukage, who you also know as the container for the Sanbi. He'll be joined by 2 bodyguards, though I haven't been given the names yet as they haven't settled. As for Kumo, they are sending Ni Yugito and Karabi, the containers for the Nibi and Hachibi respectively. Karabi's Genin team will also be joining you. Explained the Hokage. For the most part Naruto wasn't surprised by the names given. From what he could guess, Taki probably figured they were getting rid of Fu and had jumped at the chance to get her out of the village. Han and Roshi, he had learned, didn't really consider themselves as part of Iwa anymore, as both had left the village after the death of the Naidame before the Sandame had taken office. Kuretsuchi was a name he'd heard before in conversations with the two, and from what he learned was the Sandame Tsuchikage's granddaughter. He had already known Yagura would be going, as the man had already basically retired his position, having appointed his successor, and was looking to break off into his self-imposed exile due to his forced actions as a result of the Uchiha Genjutsu. Yugito was no surprise, as he'd learned that she was a very well-respected member of Kumo's forces, though he wondered what it had taken for the Raikage to allow Karabi's inclusion. A few days later found Naruto standing within Kyoko, the tree ship belonging to Noik. At the moment he, along with a rather large group, was gathered within what appeared to be a forest but was what he knew to be a subspace within the ship. The group included himself and all of what was now known as the Konoha 11, the group including himself, Sakura, Teams 8, 10 and Guy along with their respective senseis. Also included were each of the ambassadors from the other village, with a guy named Utakata and surprisingly enough Zabuza acting as the Yondaime Mizukage's bodyguards. He himself had been given a bodyguard of his own by the name of Azuki Yugo. At the moment he stood supported by crutches with a brace surrounding his right knee. Also present were Hana, Ayame, who was all set to begin her schooling, and even Tucci, who had decided to join his daughter for the culinary schooling. Sakura's parents and of course their grandmother were also present, as was Hinata's little sister Hanabi. As this was Noiki's ship, the Masaki family was all present along with Mihashi and Ryoko, though Sena and his wives had decided to travel in their ship. At the moment most everyone was busy looking on at the vastness of space and the beauty of their home planet with their own eyes. As he slowly lowered himself to the ground so not to aggravate his injury, he was soon surrounded by all 6 of his hounds, who hovered protectively around their clearly injured master. As he leaned back into the grass and looked up at the stars, he found his breath taken away, and not for the first time. As he settled in for the journey ahead, he closed his eyes and relaxed. For now he would focus on healing, and once that was done, training and adventure was waiting.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.